OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
It's 7:30. You're with us here on OTB AM. Eoin, Johnny and Colin with you in studio for the morning. We'll have Nathan with us in a little while, and later we will have Damien Delaney, we will have Gordon Darcy, we will have Andy Moran on the show as well. So a hell of an OTB AM coming your way between now and 10 o'clock. We'll be talking a lot about Ireland. We may squeeze a little bit of England chat in after their disappointing starts at the Nations League, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can tweet us at Off The Ball or comment on the YouTube stream if that's where you're getting us. Give us a rating out of 10 for Nathan Collins' goal last night. I think that's probably the only place to start. Or maybe even more to the point, give us a price tag for Nathan Collins this morning. Colin Buig, Johnny Ward, you're very welcome.
Good morning.
Johnny,
morning, lads.
What did you make of that last night?
I was just saying to the lads there, like, will Nathan Collins ever not start a game for Ireland again? Until such time as he's like 50 and can't run. I mean, what a performance. Like, I honestly, like, you're thinking of the future here in terms of, and it wasn't even the goal really, to be honest. It was like the goal has been described as one of the best goals Ireland has ever scored, right? Which maybe it was, and like outside the foot finish. I think he got a bit of luck. He turned left and the ball kind of deflected into his way, and he then his only option really was to do the outside the foot, and he's a good enough footballer to do that. And I thought his interview in RT afterwards was really endearing, where he's just like, I like to enjoy myself on the football pitch.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, Tony O'Donoghue tried to get him to describe the goal multiple times,
3 times in a row.
And I think the one thing we can say about the goal is that it was certainly instinctive, because Nathan Collins didn't really know what the hell happened until he watched the whole thing back.
Yeah, I
that's
got
a good thing.
I got that impression, and I don't know though, his control on the ball. And I think his sheer physicality as well. I think, like, he won so many headers. I mean, a lot of echoes of Paul McGrath. But his composure on the ball, and I don't know if it's a physical thing with him, where he's just able to sort of dominate players, even Yarmolenko at times. So that was Nathan Collins. I mean, it was a great night in many ways, I think. Or certainly a very good night. But Nathan Collins, I mean, and you're thinking of, like, all of the young players that were playing and were not playing last night. I mean, and all of the under-21 players who didn't play for the under-21s, who nearly topped their group, and all this noise about the management, like, over the last week is just, like, so tiresome. And I know we've a show to fill, and we're going to probably talk about it as well, but, like, come on, look at the positives here and look at the bigger picture.
I don't think it's hard to look for the positives this morning, Colin.
No, not at all. What a difference a week makes. 7 days is a long time in politics. Like, I was saying there beforehand, if the results were reversed, so had we won the first 2 games of this 4-game period and lost the second 2, then the narrative this morning would be like, it's not good enough, it's not consistent enough. But now the mood is so much better, and I was reading the comments online, like, fascinated by the comments overnight to see what the general reaction to it was. And I would say it's about 75% positivity. I think there are a lot of people who've made up their mind about Stephen Kenny, and a few people, state their case and make their arguments about why they don't believe in the Kenny regime. But the positivity is undeniable since that Scotland game. Like, the performance in Dublin was absolutely brilliant. I was at that match. It was like as if the previous 2 games never happened. And last night I was just so impressed. And it was our own Nathan tweeted, and I think he summed it up very well when he said, for the first time in a long time in an Ireland game, we're not talking about an existential crisis. We're just talking about a very good display against an impressive international side, and we fit into that category last night.
I think we don't want to talk about an existential crisis, but the fact of the matter is that an existential crisis conversation was happening 5 days ago, and I think you're bang on that. Like, if these 2 results were the other way around, the lingering feeling would have been the crisis talk or whatever, and that's just totally ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. The results could have been exactly the same, the performances could have been exactly the same, but the mood music would have changed. Like, there was talk, there was reports last Friday that if Ireland's results didn't improve, Stephen Kenny's reign, and I quote, would have come to a juddering halt.
Yeah,
Ireland could have lost that game last night had that left winger just been a little bit more clinical.
Yeah.
Are we all of a sudden saying that this path is the wrong one? And
it would have been seen as unlucky had we lost last night, wouldn't it? Surely
it would have been. But
it's about moments as well. Like, I slightly disagree. I don't think we were brilliant against Scotland. I thought Scotland were very poor.
I thought we were better in the first half last night than against Scotland.
That was very good. We needed to be better.
But
Scotland were poor, but
against Scotland, like, some of our pass and other better teams would have just scored against us. But against Ukraine at home, we should have gotten a penalty at 0-0, and then that changes everything. Against Armenia, if we did score in the first half, I think we'll win that game comfortably. And then in the heat, We got frustrated, and that was a poor performance, in fairness. But I didn't think the Ukraine game. I agree with Kevin Doyle on RT last night. I didn't think the Ukraine performance was as bad as some people made it out, and a lot was said it was their second team, but it was still, you could tell they're a good side. Like, they're a good side, and we have so many players that were still sort of. Even last night we've 2 wing backs, so clearly not wing backs at all, and both were caught out at times. McLean for the goal, and Brown in the first half on a couple of occasions. I mean, Hogan was absolutely being carried up front. Like, we'd basically 10 players and a player who was probably out of his depth. And you saw this at other times during the campaign. But then you're thinking of, like, imagine Obafemi on the pitch last night, what he could have done. And he's only, as Dave Kelly said in the paper today, he's an overnight sensation after 4 years. But, like, Obafemi would have caused Ukraine lots of problems because they looked like they needed somebody to stretch them. And, like, just moments. And you're watching that game last night, you're like, I really enjoyed that game. I really enjoyed the game on Saturday. I hadn't enjoyed Ireland for the guts of 20 years. Yeah. But so it's like, I'm enjoying watching them again. And it's the possibility of the youth that we have. And the fact that they're clearly buying into Stephen Kenny. And I don't really care what anyone else says as long as the players are buying into him. And
it's the reasons why we're enjoying the game. Well, the reason why I'm enjoying the game isn't solely down to Nathan Collins scoring a wonder goal or Michael Obafemi and Troy Parrott linking up beautifully on Saturday. It's also on Saturday Scott Hogan closing down Craig Gordon, and everybody around him just like applauding what he had done. It's the game heating up last night. The Yarmolenko kicking out of the Ireland player, but the Ireland player is giving it back to him. Like that old sense of like aggression and the sort of temperature ratcheting up in a tight 1-1, which I really enjoyed last night.
Totally.
That I think was actually absent previously. It wasn't just the absence of flair and great goals by centre backs that are going to go maybe potentially to quite a high level in the game, but it's also kind of like the basic elements of characteristics that you look for in footballers that I think were absent, and I think that collectively we're all enjoying a lot more than we were because they're more present right now than they were. And
honestly, I think Bazunu saves the goal against Ukraine, being honest, and maybe I'm wrong. And again, a lot of the narrative is Kenny called that a fluke. Maybe it was a fluke, maybe it wasn't, but it's almost like he's been admonished for putting a positive spin on things, which I think is so much of a contrast to old Irish managers. And fair enough, you can argue with some of the things he says, but with Bazunu would have saved that. We're missing Obama Madeli, we're missing the heart of our defence last night.
Duffy, Egan, Coleman,
all absent. We're missing an outstanding right wing back. We're playing a guy left wing back that isn't really a defender. Then we're missing Ida and Obafemi up front, and we were very good. I was talking about the core of this team going forward with Bazunu in goal and 3 centre backs. I think I said that before I'd even seen Nathan Collins play for Ireland. And I mean, the narrative has totally changed now because this man is going to be a colossus. Like, that performance was outrageous. It was practically flawless. And the goal was the goal, but everything else about it. And he just has this like belief in himself that I think Kenny is inculcating in young players. You can do this. Don't be afraid to be Irish. Don't be afraid, because you're Irish, to take on 3 players as a centre back and hit the ball with your outside of your foot into the bottom corner. Don't be afraid to do that, because we've been afraid for too long. We've been afraid where midfielders wouldn't even cross the halfway line, not to mind a centre back.
It actually statistically was nearly flawless, Nathan Collins' performance. Our own Jack Keegan has compiled.
How are lads giving him 9 out of 10? It was clearly 10.
92% pass completion rate, 3 out of 3 dribbles completed, 3 headed clearances, 9 recoveries, 4 out of 5 aerial duels won. So there's your not flawless, 4 out of 5 only.
And 92%.
But I love that interview afterwards. It was like the Will Farrell old school moment where I just blacked out there. I didn't know what happened. I just picked up the ball. Next thing I know, I'm scoring an absolute world class goal. Has the centre half scored a better goal? I mean, I put it to Phil Egan this morning. He was like, surely there's been some centre half who has run the entire length of the pitch at the elite level of the game.
Oh, well,
Virgil van Dijk scored a great goal.
Vincent Kompany against Leicester City to win the
but that's
Premier
League. Kind of the Obafemi mould of great goals.
Well, you mean the specific
great goals in different ways since Saturday.
The thing about it is that we will obviously rush to kind of look at the other great central defenders in the world at the moment, and it probably will be hyperbole to say that Nathan Collins can get to the very, very top level. However, the characteristics that seem to exist in some of the top defenders in the world right now, for example, Virgil van Dijk, it seems that there is a little bit of that in Nathan Collins, just because by virtue of the fact that he is a big man and he has this ability to nudge somebody off the ball in brutal fashion while it looking unbelievably graceful, and by extension not giving away fouls, being able to kind of shepherd opponents away from the ball in a way that Van Dijk does. I'm not saying that he's going to get to that level at all, but it's just, I think that's what's getting people very excited this morning as well, is that he's showing those same characteristics that are very en vogue for the top central defenders at the moment.
He's 6'4", like, and he's not long turned 21, and you saw even in the second half when Kelleher played it out to him, and there was again moments from the game on Saturday where we're playing it out to Duffy, who's just not good on the ball, and he's going to give the ball away. Duffy's position for me now, you're looking at it and you're like, I mean, he's our talisman. He's really good going forward, but like Nathan Collins can never not play for Ireland again.
Well, you see, he can score the Duffy goal as well. Is a thing.
Yeah, he's capable.
Yeah.
Actually, not to put you on the spot now, but I was thinking about this. If everyone's fit, what's your starting back five with the wing backs?
I love Moba like so. If, you know, and again, he has to come back in now and get over his injury. But
would you have Egan back in alongside Collins?
I'd probably have Dara O'Shea, Mandela and Collins, to be honest. I Duffy, just for me, he's brilliant, like, from set pieces, but he gives the ball away so much that I do think it's a problem. I'd probably be mocked for that now. Like, I think Duffy still makes a lot of mistakes with the ball at his feet, and that does cost us. So then you're only as strong as your weakest link in terms of passing the ball out from the back. And the other two are
wing
pretty
backs.
Comfortable. Collins is just looks like he has essentially everything. And as I was saying there, like, when Kelleher played the ball out to him the second half, and there wasn't really a pass on, he just moved back, did a quick turnaround, gave it back to Kelleher. Problem solved. That's grand. We're still in possession. The wing back positions, clearly Doherty, and left wing back
Stevens?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think McLean, like, in fairness to him, he's not flawless at the back. Neither is Stevens. Now, Stevens isn't the best defender in the world either. But I don't know. Like, I don't know. It's the one position that we I think we could have a better left wing back, because in fairness, McLean, he's not a defender. We're getting away with it a bit.
But do we need a defender in that position, given you've got three very mobile, athletic, very talented centre backs in your future back three there, with Oma Bamidele, Dara O'Shea, and of course Nathan Collins.
They're all right-footed as well, though.
That's
so
the
it's
problem.
kinda,
So you're looking for a left-footer there at some stage.
Yeah, I still think against good teams you get caught out with three at the back in wing positions. They're going to target you. They targeted Brown and they should have scored.
Yeah.
And they didn't really target McLean. McLean did quite a lot wrong about that goal. His positioning wasn't great, but Yarmolenko totally overplayed the ball. So, like, he gave us an out, and then McLean just wasn't able to defend as a defender should, and basically shepherd him to a position where you can argue then that the two centre backs were
Collins was at fault.
a little bit asleep,
himself,
but I mean, these things are happening so fast. I mean, what are you supposed to do? There were 3 over 2
totally.
in any event, but the wing backs will, in good games, they will catch you out when you've basically wingers playing there, in my view.
I think McLean anticipated cutting back on the left foot for Yarmolenko, just like McLean would do in that position himself. So he's probably thinking from the attacker's point of view. I thought he did quite well. But you do need a wing back who can defend in some way, because, as Johnny said, like, the right wing opposition will just destroy us. Like, it was
right
wing opposition.
We've had plenty of that in the Irish press in the last few days.
There's been, like, obviously some suggestion that maybe we could potentially we could see, like, someone like Chidozie Ogbene played as a right wing back at some point in the future.
It's the same problem.
Many right options. Though.
That's it, obviously.
But you see, Ogbene, for example, playing right wing back in the Armenia game away might have made more sense. When you're playing a team that essentially are parking the bus to a large degree, you can obviously take more chances, but I still think the Heat was underplayed in terms of the Armenia performance. I think it's very difficult for Irish players to play in Heat like that over 90 minutes, and they kind of flattened out in the second half. And then, I mean, I'm sorry, but Callum Robinson, who again isn't really up to this level in my view, like, we should have a penalty in the first half. And I mean, it's a lot of whataboutery here, but, like, let's not overreact to everything. And I don't think we were amazing in either of the last 2 games. I don't think we were amazing, but it's been a very positive window, I think, all in all, in terms of the future. Like, let's look at the future here, and let's look at Kenny trying to bring a massive sea change in the way we approach football as a nation, genuinely as a nation. And even the Irish under-21s, Crawford, like, said before the 21s game, yes, we believe we can beat Italy. He said after the game, I would have bitten your hand off for second place before the group started. So he's not getting called out for changing the narrative. Like, so let's laud positivity.
Yeah. Like, I do think, like, the one metric, and it's an intangible that you have to look at, is are Ireland making progress? And maybe a secondary point is how quick is that progress happening? Is it happening quick enough? And I think especially given the age of some of the players who have started to shine recently for Ireland, you'd have to say that progress is happening. Like just a couple of comments coming in, like just like your point on the heat. Shifty lad says, morning lads, in Armenia the temperature was very high and having to play in that would have been very tough. I think our passing is getting better and not side to side for the sake of it. I think that's spot on. And then
and some longer balls as well, from which are totally warranted if you've any pace up top, because we need to mix it up a bit, and we are mixing it up.
And Kelleher's like unafraid to do that as well. It's not just constantly out to the centre back.
And sorry, if you have Duffy in your team, it just creates wobbles because you can't trust him on the ball. It's simple as that. And we saw like he was very poor Saturday.
Well, I'd be very interested to see what happens when Stephen Kenny does have a full deck to play
for
from.
the back three is fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, like really, truly, it is. But would you not? Would you dismiss the notion that Duffy is too much of an attacking threat at set pieces?
Yeah, it's and he's a brilliant leader as well, and I think everyone loves him. Like, it's just he's not Nathan Collins, and he never will be. I mean, Nathan Collins is going to be one of the best Irish players of all time.
Would you have raised him that high even before yesterday?
You're going to that level. He's going to become one of the best.
You
Irish
can't
players
at
of all
that
time.
age with that experience.
Would you have
can't
thought
produce
that
forms like that? Forget about the goal. He was flawless. Like
24 hours ago, if we had asked you that, would you have said the same about Collins?
I actually haven't seen enough of him, and even in this window, like. You know, I watched one of the games in the Blasket Islands. Like, I'd love to have been at the games. I couldn't. I was away on holidays. So, but last night, sorry, like, and I mean, you can't.
He was in Cork.
All right.
You can't. What's that?
He was in Cork.
I was in Cork
Holidays,
as well. Yeah. But you can't produce forms like that. Like, this is a good Ukrainian team. And he was just immense. He was 10 out of 10.
Well, sorry, he was 9.2 out of 10 on passing accuracy. Let's not.
Yeah.
The point to Jack Egan was very harsh.
Let's get our
Yeah.
very
Let's put it to the listeners, like, and viewers. Like, is Nathan Collins going to be one of the great Irish greats? Absolutely. I mean, look,
Well, we're getting carried away now. This kind of reminds me of Aaron
like,
Connolly talks. Remember Aaron Connolly after the Spurs performance for Brighton in 2019?
Yeah.
And like, everyone was saying, we found our Robbie Keane.
I do think it's possible to absolutely compare some of his attributes with some of the greats in the game. Obviously, the future is impossible to predict, but I applaud your like, we will absolutely clip this if he does go to the top of the game, you know.
Yeah, because you know what I mean? Like, I mean, injuries can derail players and so much can go wrong. And like we've seen, you know, Paul McGrath like was a great player with horrible knees. Like, so we hope that, you know, but I can't see, like, that performance for me is it's one of these seminal moments in your sporting life where you're watching something and you're like, Jesus, did that just happen?
To be fair, you're not on your own there. Like, I mean, just like Irish Times is in front of me here. Gavin Cummins' opening paragraph is, "The future is now. Mark the date. June 14th, 2022. That's the night Nathan Collins entered the collective consciousness of Irish sport." So like, that is the general feeling around him.
Yeah. In Bad We Trust there in the comments on YouTube has said that David Luiz used to score like a collection of classics.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
But to answer that, Philip Quinn has written that it is Nathan Collins' first ever goal for Ireland. So has there been a better debut goal at international level?
Geez,
I'm really trying to find the moment as that nothing can touch this goal.
Well, had Michael Obafemi scored before his screamer?
Had he not? No. Well, okay, let's say, I'll tailor that.
Sure, maybe
I'll tailor
he
that
has.
comment. Best ever first goal scored by a defender.
Okay, the parameters are narrowing, and I can
the filter search is.
can assuredly say the answer to your question is no. No Irish defender has scored a better goal on their
I'm sorry, no, but
first goal.
You know the little flick at the end that when he skins the last defender, it almost felt like he meant it to hit his thigh or knee.
Yeah, he definitely
it looked
didn't.
so deliberate. I mean, he obviously didn't, but it looked so deliberate. But the finish, when he saw from behind the goal on the replay, I mean, the curl on it was just so beautiful.
But before that, if memory serves me well, he was involved in a very good bit of play. And I can't remember what it was, but he then wins the ball so high up the pitch. So his endorphins are high at the moment. He's full of confidence. And then I think if you play sport and everything's kind of going well for you in a game, and then you do like a move like that, and you kind of fluke a position somewhat where you're in a one-on-one, you're so high, I think, confidence-wise at that stage where you can do the outside the foot. And by the way, the outside the foot was basically the only logical option available to him at that time because it was the clear shot at goal. But we just don't see that from centre-backs. And he made it look so easy. I'm just like, wow, I mean, have you been doing this all your career in training or what? Or is this just a once-in-a-lifetime event? But it wasn't the goal for me. It was everything else, really. Like, if the goal never happened, I'd be raving about Collins.
And I think that's almost more interesting. I think the goal is all Nathan Collins, don't get me wrong here, but I'm not sure the goal happens unless we're playing three at the back. Because with
absolutely
that,
not.
he can just take that
Absolutely
risk. He can pop into midfield. He can take the gamble. It looks like he could see what was going to happen before it happened, and that's, I think, is potentially part of the reason why you're so excited. But he wouldn't be able to make the decision to act on what he predicted if there was only one centre back beside him.
And he certainly wouldn't be able to do that if Stephen Kenny weren't manager, because there's no way you'd have a centre back that high up the pitch. Simple as, and the three at the back. Kenny's spoken about the fluidity of different systems, and you get bogged down in 3-2-4-1, 3 blah 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 blah. But the fluidity of a three at the back is that you can do something like that. You can be a little bit aggressive, particularly if one of your three at the back can play football, and Nathan Collins clearly can, and Duffy probably can't very much. So it's going to be a big dilemma going forward.
I would have been very interested to hear what the conversation would have been the morning after the Serbia game last year. Had Oma Bamidele scored that screamer, that it was a brilliant save by the Serbian keeper, wasn't it? And I think that we would have been very excited in a similar way. And you know what?
He was outstanding that night as well.
Before I go to Nathan, I just wanted to ask you, it sounds like you weren't too unimpressed by the first Ukraine game in Dublin. Would that be fair?
I didn't think we weren't great, but we hit the bar and we should have been 1-0 up from a penalty. So I think a lot of the narrative was, it was Ukraine's second team. Watch the game though; they're a good side. They're a good side, and a lot of our players are coming off long seasons. A lot of them aren't necessarily even playing at club level. A lot of them are bit part players. We've square pins and round holes. I thought it was bad, but it was more so the fact that it followed the Armenia game, which I think there were extenuating circumstances. I think Scotland were terrible against us.
But we still had to do it. I mean, the goals, the second goal particularly, the build-up play for that. Even
the
first
quality
goal.
of three of our last four goals. Sorry, our last three goals.
Yeah.
They're three of the best goals Ireland have probably scored in 20 years, basically. Let's be honest. So we're actually. Is it not nice that we're enjoyable to watch as well again? We were horrible to watch. There were 50,000 at the game.
It is, but it would be accused now of hyperbole and getting carried away with things. Where are we now?
Where are you possibly getting the hyperbole accusation from?
The Obafemi pass for the Parrott goal was. That's why you watch football. That's why you watch. I didn't think Obafemi had that in him. Obviously he does. That was the greatest moment of beauty of the whole 4 games.
Johnny, you've had the greatest night of your life by the sounds of things. I mean, it's I'm not going to knock positivity here this morning. I'm going to bring Nathan Murphy in though, who I'm not sure where Nathan Collins is in terms of your future Irish prospect.
From Nathan Collins to Nathan Murphy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're hearing it all here in studio this morning, Nathan, that this guy could. What's your exact take, Johnny? Best Irish player ever, possibly?
I would say, Nathan, that he's going to be an Irish great, essentially. Byrne things going wrong injury wise or whatever, how could he not be after doing that at 21 years of age?
I think, Johnny, you have a temptation to get carried away at times, and I've definitely felt since the start of the Stephen Kenny reign that you've maybe over-egged how brilliant some of these players are going to be, but I think you're dead right with Nathan Collins, because I think he's already started to do it. Whereas a lot of those young players, we have no control over what their club futures are and whether they'll play enough matches and how that will impact their development with Ireland. But Nathan Collins has already had half a season in the Premier League where he's been exceptional. And now it's just a matter of where he goes next. It may well be Burnley, because obviously me and Tarkowski have both left. So Burnley may think, well, this guy will get us back up to the Premier League next season, and it's worth sticking with him. And also they spent 15 million on him, which means he's worth at least double that now. So, is the team going to go straight out and spend that? I think they should. But yeah, he's going to be the middle of that back three, you would have to think now, for the foreseeable future, regardless of what happens with Shane Duffy, though he is an option on either side. So I'm with Johnny. The goal was obviously of the absolute highest quality, and to have that composure to finish with the outside of the right boot. But it was the rest of his game throughout the 4 matches. Remember, that happened after starting all 4 games. One of the few players who have started all 4 games. And to be able to step in at the right time, which is what all modern centre-halves do, if you want to press high, your centre-halves are going to have to take those risks as well and just keep recycling the ball. At the pace that he's shown throughout the 3 or 4 matches, his timing in the tackle, his anticipation, he looks like an absolute superstar. And I think the fact that he has done it in the Premier League and he has played really well in a struggling side over the past few months of the season shows that he is somebody we should get unbelievably excited about.
like, I mean, it's not exactly the greatest nomination in the world, but for an Irish player to be nominated for Premier League Player of the Month at his age probably shows, in a struggling side, as you say, that there's clearly been some suggestion that he is standing out already at the level that he's played with at the club. But what might be kind of maybe a fairer question, Nathan, is comparing Nathan Collins to his current Irish teammates. Like, is he the one at this point who you would have ahead of everybody else in terms of potentially reaching the highest point in their career? If you're looking around at, say, there was obviously huge hype around Troy Parrott at the start of his career, could still yet happen from at any level, and a number of other players. Do you think that the hype is realist about Collins when you compare him to the Ireland youngsters?
Again, I think he's done it already. He has played a good chunk of games, whereas Troy Parrott, listen, is developing and did really well over the few games. And again, last night, while he missed the golden opportunity, his movement was brilliant, makes the odd bad decision. But it was all hype with Troy Parrott because of what had happened in pre-season with Tottenham and the expectation that maybe he could go on and become the backup to Harry Kane. Nathan Collins has had a good run of 10, 15 Premier League matches and not looked out of place at all. So, yeah, I think right now you'd have to say he has the highest ceiling because he's been there, he's done it. Andrew Momadele obviously looked exceptional at times, but injuries have curtailed his season. Maybe Adam Ida finally kicks on next season and gets a good run of games. But we have had a lot of false starts. Michael Obafemi amongst them. Think of Michael Obafemi scoring that goal for Southampton against Manchester United. Think of Aaron Connolly scoring that brace for Tottenham, or for Brighton against Tottenham. Like, both of those moments, you're thinking, these guys are going to lead our front line for the next 10 years. There's no way they can't. But football can turn when you're a young player very quickly. And there's no guarantees with Nathan Collins. What is the move to the Premier League? You want to get a move where you're playing. So maybe you do another season actually with Burnley and play every single match. And then you're ready for a move to a top 6, top 8 team.
Play under Vincent Kompany for a season.
Right now. Well, exactly. It hasn't done Josh Cullen any harm. It's very hard to predict what's going to happen with Burnley, I'd say, because they've lost their 2 senior centre halves. I think Kevin Long and Nathan Collins are pretty much the only centre halves they have left. But they may just think, actually, if we can get 30, 35 million, just been relegated, they haven't got anything for me or Tarkowski, let's go and take that. But it's exciting to watch. I saw him over at the Etihad. I went over with the kids to watch Man City Burnley in October, and he started that day. And, City obviously don't play with a striker. And I think Phil Foden played as the false 9. And even though they ended up losing 2-0, and he made one mistake towards the end, the sort of mistake you kind of expect from a young player where he just switched off for a moment. I kind of wondered that day how he'd get on, where he didn't have anyone to mark. They were all just dropping deep constantly. There was this brilliant movement from the City front 3. And he looked like one of the best players on the pitch. Every time he got in the ball, again, the quality of his passing. He's a proper modern centre half. Even at, 6'4", he's a really good passer. He's got the pace. He obviously has the confidence as well. So, yeah, it was a night I think we'll be talking about for quite a few years with Nathan Collins.
What we're all saying is we're going to have to redo Kildare's Mount Rushmore because he could be the greatest ever.
See, I think in lads who play football, they're not, if they're from sort of near Dublin, they don't go down the Gaelic games lines. If I'm from Meath or I'm from Kildare, we didn't talk about Evan Ferguson, who I saw some of the 21s, but he did very well in bits of the games. We should be talking about him potentially, what he could be.
Evan Ferguson, though, is again with overhyping players. Evan Ferguson, everyone says, is the real deal. But the problem Evan Ferguson has,
he has to prove it.
That he's at Brighton. And, Brighton have traditionally had problems scoring goals. They answered some of them last year. But do they look to a teenager to solve them? Or do they go and spend 25 million on a striker and suddenly, from being one of the substitutes, you start missing out on a few squads and you end up going another year without playing too much first team football? Maybe they let him go on loan. Yeah, the potential is there with so many of these guys.
Small bone as well, Nathan.
Is he's there.
Yeah,
small bone sitting on the bench in Southampton.
He's small bone as well. I think if you take a slightly longer term view on this, as opposed to how do we do in the last 90 minutes, which everyone seems to be so obsessed about in this country. Taking a long term view, we only need some of these players to really hit the heights, and we could be in a great place. Where we're watching an Ireland team where we're going to score goals here. We're going to be really exciting, and we're not going to be playing on the back foot. And as well as that, in fairness, Nathan, we finished the game quite strongly last night.
Oh, that was one of the main takeaways, that Ireland were pushing and pushing. Yeah, they nearly got done on the counter attack, and there'd be massive accusations of naivety if they had conceded late on. But Ireland were the better team in the last 15 minutes of that game. I thought Jeff Hendrick played really well when he came on and added a bit more of an impetus to try and get Ireland on the front foot. And it's just to get one or two of those attacking players to make an impact. It's probably one of the disappointments over the 4 games that the players who came on to replace the front 3 in the 4 games never really were that threatening. But this wasn't. There's ways of drawing a game, and listen, John Giles will be on tomorrow night, and I'm sure he'll say you take each game as its merits. And maybe actually last night, when you go 1-0 up, was a massive missed opportunity to win a huge game away from home by just one silly moment of switching off at the start of the second half. But I think we've all sat through dozens and dozens of Irish 1-1 draws away from home, and there's a way of drawing 1-1, and quite often we're smash and grab, hanging on for dear life at the end, and just thankful that we got out of Dodge with a point. Last night I think we can genuinely be disappointed that we didn't win that game, and with a lot of young players on the pitch and an awful lot of options right now, and some good headaches for Stephen Kenny that he needs to start getting right now, these headaches, and get his selection right when they go to Scotland for the next game in September. That we're not going at the end. Well, actually, should it have been Michael Obafemi? Should have been Chidozie Ogbene? And I'm not sure what they are, because right now I think trying to select what your first 11 is it's a difficult enough job.
Very hard. Are you at least starting with Cullen, Malumbi and Knight at the moment? Like you complimented Jeff Hendrick just now.
Yeah, I think, and again, I think it's about the way the Premier League season is starting. The league season is starting. The international window is late September, so there's actually going to be maybe 8, 9, 10 games for some of these players before the international window for them to get a bit of a run. And what Johnny was talking about there, and I do think most teams are in the same at the end of the season, where some players have played lots, some players haven't played very much at all, and suddenly you have to play 4 games in a row. Things will change quickly in terms of, does Jeff Hendrick actually get a run of games and come into it in flying form, and is Jason Malumbi going to be in the West Brom team? So Stephen Kenny will need to take account of that. But I think, right now, Kelleher probably keeps his place in goals. You're looking at a back 3, potentially of Coleman, Collins, Egan. Doherty definitely comes in on the right. McLean on the left. As you said, the midfield 3 of Cullen, Malumbi, Knight. And then probably right now, it's hard to see how you don't go with a front 2 of Troy Parrott and Michael Obafemi. And it's Chidozie Ogbene, bizarrely, has probably been one of the big losers of this run of fixtures.
A couple of things there. You're saying if Bazunu comes back, Kelleher will still start?
I think Kelleher deserves to start, particularly after the performance last night. There was one moment, and they never showed it on the highlights, and a ball was played back to him early in the first half, and it was pinged through the air. And he just controls it with the underside of his foot. It goes under his foot.
Remember that
happened twice in the first 5 minutes. They
was in the
absolute.
It was a test.
I think Bazunu, though. I think Bazunu's definitely potentially in the same Nathan Collins completely overhyping mode on a Wednesday morning, Thursday morning. But Bazunu's a better keeper than Kelleher.
On what? Why do you think
I
that?
think
Kelleher's going to be.
I'd like to hear it though. Why do you think he's better?
I think Kelleher should have saved the goal against Ukraine. To be honest, I think Bazunu just saves that. Bazunu's save in the Luxembourg game away, Bazunu looks basically already almost going to be top class. I think he's a better keeper than Kelleher, and this is a great problem to have. Kelleher on the ball is so good, but I start Bazunu anyway. I also think that Ogbene and Robinson, their lack of quality at times just being found out in good games, and I think we'll be looking at Obafemi going forward. That's my take.
Well, Ukraine at home was particularly damaging to Ogbene, where there was 2-3 occasions where he got the ball on the halfway line and Ukraine were retreating, and you expected them either to put the head down and really charge at these guys, or there was an option of picking out a pass in behind, and he just didn't have it.
He doesn't have it. I just think he doesn't have it.
There's also a mitigating factor here in these being end of season games.
Yeah.
And you can't just dismiss the mid-season quality of these players because in June they look, especially when you talk about running out of defence, they don't look like they can run out of defence the same way as they could back in December. I think that's a huge mitigating factor.
Look at Callum Robinson's club career. He's clearly plateaued in terms of where he's at, and
I think maybe that's different to Ogbene.
Yeah, so Ogbene has obviously been playing League One, got promoted, and he's still something of a blank canvas. But I think there are moments where you can just tell that he needs to up his game to stay in this team. Whereas the Obafemi quality for that pass, I never see Ogbene doing that. I never see him even doing anything. Maybe I'm being harsh, but these are good decisions for Kenny to make.
Well, the key thing, and you bring it up there, Nathan, is that it's hard to see how it doesn't become Obafemi and Parrott up front. Like, that's as much to do with the combination we saw on Saturday as opposed to the individual qualities of the two players. I know it's one game, but like, I agree with you actually on what you said earlier about Parrott and his movement last night, which I thought was really good. But it still felt that not having Obafemi beside him last night probably diminished his own capabilities as well.
Well, he needs to know exactly, I think, where his strike partner is going to be. And Scott Hogan didn't have a good night, and you could tell by the look on his face when he walked off that he probably thought, that's, I think, his 11th cap, and he still hasn't got a goal. He should have had one on Saturday, but he still hasn't really taken his opportunity. So if Obafemi is back and he's fit, and he just needs a good run of games for Ireland, for his club, where he's always available. Yeah, right now it is an option. But like, the challenge for Stephen Kenny is to make sure he picks the right team at the right time. So if Callum Robinson is back in and he looks at Callum Robinson in training, maybe Callum Robinson gets a move during the summer and saying, she's actually, there's a lot of things we're seeing here that Callum Robinson had when he was in his peak run of form and he was scoring goals. Like, maybe Callum Robinson does deserve to come back in. But right now, I think if you're looking at mistakes over the 4 games, like picking Robinson at home against Ukraine was definitely one of them, because he didn't look at it at all over in Yerevan, and then to stick with him where he's definitely a yard or two off the pace. Like, even for the penalty, which I'm not sure was a penalty appeal. Like, I when that ball was played through, and maybe I'm a bit harsh about it because he did play that ball through and Robinson didn't quite look ready. I expected Robinson to just zip clear of the centre half to suddenly have a couple of yards on them, but he didn't. He didn't quite anticipate the pass, didn't have that little bit of pace, and we've seen a few of those performances from Robinson. So the balance, and like, that's the job of good management, is knowing which of these players are 100% right at that moment and making sure you can get them into your team. So, like, it's easy in hindsight. I don't think anyone said that Michael Obafemi and Troy Parrott should be a front two against Armenia away. Everyone felt that we're incredibly excited about Ogbene and Robinson, and now we're sort of feeling that these guys have kind of moved out of the picture. It may not be that way, particularly with injuries. He's still going to need these guys over the next few years. And
that's probably something that we need to kind of maybe look deeper into as well, is that Stephen Kenny can't possibly know his starting 11 right now. And that means that this team is nowhere near the finished article. And yes, there are loads of exciting moments from last night. The Nathan Collins thing in particular is something that's very, very reasonable to get very, very excited about. But it does feel that there are still a lot of questions around certain areas of this team. And it's the old cliche of a manager doesn't know his best starting 11. That for me is like a big reason why we can expect this thing to take a little bit longer in terms of finding an end product here.
Yeah, but I think like the result against Armenia has put them on the back foot more than they would like after these 4 games. Yes, we're ending on a definite high and a real sense of positivity again, but they can't keep having these setbacks. They need to put together a run of results at the end of this Nations League, heading and start well in the European qualifiers, because international football is always small bursts. And I understand that people feel there's a massive overreaction one way or another, depending if we win or if we lose. But like, that's every team. Like, look at Scotland. Look at the fallout that was there for Scotland after Saturday, because they lost one match. They've lost 1 in 10 before that. Look at England right now after losing last night. Like, we don't see a lot of international football. So when they come in these bursts over a couple of weeks, it is bloody intense. And if things don't go well, there is going to be question marks around every part of it. So I think the blooding in period is probably done. Most of these players are well into double figures in terms of caps now. And you probably never settle on a definite starting 11 because of injuries, but I think we're getting to a stage where we need to start knowing. Like, I think we're at a stage where we need to know that it's Malumbi, Cullen, and Knight, and go with that for 3 or 4 games, unless Jeff Hendrick comes in and is in the form of his life and just has to get in that team.
A lot of love for Cullen in the comments this morning, actually, because
he's 60
so solid,
games this season, I think.
So yeah, that's what you need. You see, like the starting 11 that Nathan named there, his ideal one, is pretty good. Like, and you're leaving out the likes of Amabadele and Ida and Duffy. And the list could go on. Like, it's really only left wing back that we're kind of uncertain of at the moment. So it's great, but transfers play such a big part. Like, your call for Bazunu. I mean, that could really happen by October time when we play the autumn round of fixtures, because presumably Bazunu is going to be Southampton's first choice goalkeeper. Keller,
not necessarily. Alex McCarthy is still at Southampton, and certainly right now the expectation is McCarthy will stay as number 1 at the start of next season. But maybe Bazunu is just so goddamn good in pre-season that they decide to give him a go. And I know a lot of people aren't fully convinced by Alex McCarthy, but again, he may not. And you're right, like, that's the big question about the goalkeeping position. Creeping Keller says he's going to have a conversation. I don't really get the sense from Creeping Keller he wants to leave Liverpool.
It's a
You
tough
know, I
one.
think another year at Liverpool and see how it plays out. And then Mark Travers, if he's in goals every single week for Bournemouth, now it doesn't look as though he's going to go back to Travers. But if Bazunu doesn't play any football between now and then, I just think what Kelleher can do with the ball at his feet, being able to kick off both feet, I don't think it's that clear cut that Bazunu is ahead of Kelleher right now.
No, it's a fair point that he's not necessarily going to definitely start for Southampton. That's fair. But if he does...
If he breaks into team,
Kelleher has a decision to make. But the thing is, seeing Kelleher in that penalty shootout against Chelsea in the League Cup final was so exciting. And I say that from a Manchester United fan, because you don't see Irish players play at the elite level of the game anymore. We're going back 10, 20 years. So it's brilliant to see a player like that. So he has a real conundrum because he's a second choice keeper at one of the best clubs in the world, the best clubs we've seen the last decade, that team. And the manager, one of the greatest managers that we've seen in the modern era, loves him. So he has a serious decision to make.
Yeah,
so does Kenny. We mentioned just Jason Knight as well. Like, I know he faded in the second half, but like you can just see moments from him where he's such a clever footballer.
Cut
And
above.
again, it's these young players that, like, I know the midfield sort of three as it is now or whatever. It's not that easy to say who plays alongside Cullen, and you know, Brown is playing out of position, sort of wing back, even though he's some good qualities going forward. But like, we have a lot of squad depth that we don't seem to have had for a long, long time, and that's what's really encouraging. Even Joel Bagan might come in into the left back situation as well down the line, because I think that will clarify itself in the next few years. Where McLean is getting on, Stevens is probably a bit vulnerable, and
a long-term solution there is probably required over the next
Bagan's a good
little
player.
while.
Like,
Plenty of mixed reaction in the comments. Paul Mallon says it's a bit silly telling people to stop overreacting to a loss when the opening of the show was a massive overreaction to a 1-1 draw. I support Kenny with the coverage here to do with some balance. Probably a fair point. James McCullough says, hi Owen, last week I messaged OTB AM. I was still behind Kenny and that our boys would silence the doubters. I hope these last few performances have gone a long way to doing that. And then finally, Kenny the dad says, we are still not good enough. Our game plan works against better teams, and the same cannot be said against poorer sides. And that's not a dig at Kenny. He is dealing with a lack of resources compared to previous managers. I do think the comparative performances between opponents of a higher quality versus a more mediocre quality is like
we beat Luxembourg
and
and Azerbaijan very comfortably, though.
In the end we did,
and
I guess.
The Armenia game, like, I know we did, and Scotland obviously got 4 there, but like, I think again that was slightly overplayed. I think we got very tired in the heat.
Yeah,
and it is what it is. And they're not.
No, the first half performance wasn't shocking against Armenia. You sort of expected, when we were on commentary that day, you expected Ireland to score in the first 10 minutes of the second half and they'll win this 2-0 and everyone will just move on with their lives. But there were also in that first half was nowhere near the energy levels and the intensity to the performance that there was last night. And maybe that was to do with the heat. Maybe it was to do with the tactics that meant they didn't have the same amount of numbers in midfield. But we sort of often look down our nose, I think, at the sort of put them under pressure idea. But like, that has to be rule one for this Ireland team, is play like the very best teams do. Don't give the opposition time in the ball. And when you win it back, like that is the big difference here, is that when they win it back, they just keep hold of possession. And there's definitely last night, like, the big difference between last night and Ukraine and the second half in Armenia is that you can say that is radically different to what Ireland were doing 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Whereas I felt second half in Armenia and the whole match against Ukraine, that could have been a Martin O'Neill team, a Mick McCarthy team, a Giovanni Trapattoni team. There was no real pattern to it. But the last 2 games were back to what we saw in the springtime and at the end of last year.
Oh, and I thought that was a very balanced assessment of the whole thing. We just happened to have the best centre half in the world.
Yeah, thank you.
Best player who's ever played the game ever.
We bring the cool-headed Nathan Murphy on to just.
Well, it's funny. I was. I mentioned I went to the Etihad, and after the match, I was there with the kids, and they obviously wanted to go and hang around afterwards and see could they meet Phil Foden or one of the Manchester City players to get a photo, and they have a little tunnel, a secret tunnel that the players can escape through. So we were just standing there. And next thing I noticed, a Burnley player come out. I was like, "Oh, there's Nathan Collins." And you could tell the kids are a bit like, "Yeah, Burnley player." My brother was like, "No, go over, get that photo with him." And I think it might well have been the first time Nathan Collins had ever been asked for a photograph by fans. And he was just the loveliest lad. He stood and he spoke with them for about 10 minutes. And now last night they were like, show me the photo.
Sorry, what was the photo? Them taking a picture of you and Nathan
Collins. Yeah. As I said, I'm just my biggest concern is first they had to deal with the emergence of Nathan Carter, and now Nathan Collins. I'm like,
Nathan
Once
Murphy,
a
I'm
great
worried
name,
about.
and I've
Yeah,
just
me
been
too.
well reduced.
It's her dad.
Nathan, good stuff.
Nathan.
Thanks a million.
Cheers, lads.
It is 8:14. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. After these ads, we're going to be turning to rugby, where we'll be joined by Gordon Darcy. But before that, here's Ireland head coach Andy Farrell talking after announcing his squad to travel to New Zealand. Back in a few.
Oh yeah, no, we're delighted. We're so excited about taking this squad as a group of 40 to probably the hardest place in world rugby to go to, and finding out about ourselves. This is a historic tour that probably will never be done again, certainly with how we've structured the tour. Maybe Ireland will never get to play a 3-game test series out there again, and this is the ultimate, isn't it? We're talking about building now towards a World Cup, and what you want to do in those type of circumstances is test yourself against the best, and it doesn't get any better or tougher than going to New Zealand and playing them in their own backyard with what we see as 5 test matches. Yeah, no, there's plenty of conversations that have been happening over the last few days, and like always, it's tough, because they all wanted to make the tour. It was all, I'm 100% sure, within their goals of the season to perform well enough to get on this tour, because they can see what it means to Irish rugby, and they want to be part of it. We've picked out a 40-man squad, which is the biggest squad that we've picked because of the schedule, etc. And they know the players that have missed out, and the injured players, and the guys who have been picked as well, that this is the opportunity to show what they're about under most extreme pressure, to see whether they can perform at the highest level, and see whether they earn the right to carry on into next year, which is obviously the World Cup year.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
I thought, oh, we're back. But you don't want to get too ahead of yourself. And then see, after that, we're back, baby. We're on the train.
Connor, you're like a nippy corner forward hanging out in the corner there. I didn't know we still had you. Go on.
A current club manager at the minute. It's Shamrocks, isn't it, Dahi, in Offaly?
Out of a job since this morning.
What?
Yeah.
What happened?
No, we walked anyway, another day's work.
GAA Late Night, live every Sunday evening, 8:30 on Twitter Spaces. Follow @OffTheBall.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong? Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match, because somewhere out there, there's someone for you, and GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
OTB
AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
18 minutes past 8, you're very welcome back to Wednesday's OTB AM. You'll have heard Andy Farrell in the break there talking at the announcement of his 40-man squad for the tour to New Zealand, which begins next month. Delighted to welcome Gordon Darcy back to the show. Gordon, how are you getting on?
Too bad. Good morning, lads.
Just on that point of, I guess, these New Zealand tours and these tours to the Southern Hemisphere in general, it feels like it's almost a pattern at this stage that the year before the World Cup, Ireland would go down there and play at least one test in New Zealand. From your own playing days, was that something that was generally spoken about, like the World Cup, was that generally spoken about all the time, as if New Zealand were this sort of preparatory expedition in order to get ready for the big one following a year later?
No, not really. Like, I suppose when you get to this stage in the season, there's probably I wouldn't even say there's any players involved in the conversations. It's the coaches are, probably have some webs in their head that they want to see play out over the next kind of 15, 16 months. But from players, like, you look at the volume of rugby that's gone through, there is a certain bit about just getting the energy tanks just, re-established and trying to get ready for what's what is the toughest tour in the professional era. You know, you go back to that tour in '97 to New Zealand. Kind of, it was '97. Yeah, I think it was '97 that went. You know, this is obviously we're better prepared going. It's not a development tour, but this is akin to that. But from the players' perspective, you know, I'd say this guy's looking to reinforce any potential the coaches might see in them in their heads, and for other players it's just to stay there. But like, I think you can't get away from the enormity of this challenge. Like, I look at it on paper and I'm just like, it is really going to be a brutal tour.
What is the area of this squad then that would give you most concern when it comes to the brutality? So I guess when we're talking about areas of squad depth here.
No, that's not that. I think it's, you know, you playing the All Blacks 3 games in a row is tough enough, but you're putting in the Maori into that. Like, there is no easy game there. So, and starting with the Maori, they'll want to set the tone for the tour. And there's this weird thing in New Zealand that they almost take it as a national. They're taking that Ireland have beaten them is it 3 out of the last 5 times as a national insult. So the Maori will be looking to soften up players ahead of the first test. I think it's unfair maybe to pick apart the squad at this stage, because we've got to see how they perform. There's cases for people being left out, and there's cases for everybody that's in there. I suppose we still have some of the inherent, you know, we probably don't have some of the injuries will probably be a concern going. No Ronan Gallagher and no Robert Balogun too, that probably jump out.
The questions that that are inherent to the squad, if you want to continue this theme, and they just won't go away, Gordon, is the questions regarding the number 10 position. And if we get into a conversation around squad depth, I think you don't even need to go that far to accept that maybe Sexton won't play every game in this tour. I don't think that's exactly a hot take, that he's not going to be available for every single minute. Do you have greater concerns or fewer concerns, say, compared to the end of the Six Nations, when it comes to Ireland's depth at 10?
Yeah, I think it's undecided, and I think we can't. There is no. There's potentially one of the young guys in Munster may come into the reckoning depending on what game time they get in Munster next year. But if you just look at the players that are on at hand, Ross Byrne didn't give the greatest showing of himself. Jack Harty at the weekend. Jack Harty is injured. And they've kind of decided on those two. So unless somebody else emerges, they're just trying to get Harry Byrne to stay fit and to see can he compete at this level, and trying to play Joey Carberry back into form again. He's not injured this time, but they're really trying to decide, I think, on what the pecking order is. And they picked 3 out halves, and there's every chance these could be the 3 out halves that go to the World Cup next year. And they're just trying to see what the best use of these resources is. But I still think there is, we're dealing in the squad we have. Like, they just need to figure out who's going to play, who's going to start those tests if Johnny isn't, and that's not clear, because you have two at halves who have different problems to solve. Joey hasn't thrived in the latter half of the season, and is probably a little bit, looks a little bit shy on confidence. And players, and I suppose people talking about maybe he should be shifting to 15 with what's his name, shifting into 10, which was
Carberry at 15.
Carberry at 15, and Ben Healy coming into 10, and I'm not sure that helps anyone in an Irish case. But it's just, I suppose, was a reflection on the malaise in the Munster attack in the last couple of games. And Harry Byrne has all the talent in the world, but can't stay fit, and whenever he plays, he tends to force the game. So I think they just they're putting these guys in and giving them every chance to cement themselves, because that's the age-old thing, isn't it? Sometimes it's harder to get out of a national team. To any good performances from either of those players could go a long way over the next kind of 15 months.
I do find the Harry Byrne conversation very interesting, given that in front of him you've Johnny Sexton, who, as we've just said, is probably not going to play all the time in this tour, and Joey Carberry, who is injury prone. So Harry Byrne could, it's not unreasonable to think, be thrown into the deep end in this tour. Is this potentially a sort of sink or swim moment for him? I know it's very early in his career and he's had injury troubles that have sort of delayed his emergence, but do you think this could be a very, very big few months for him?
It could be. I would be surprised if he gets first shot at the title. I would say there is a Carberry, Harry Byrne. It's between those two. This is a, it's almost like a Lions tour going into it. You've got the Maori first. There's going to be game time. Split between them. You would expect Sexton to start the first test, and whoever performs better in that Maori test to be able to get the option off the bench. So it really is fighting. Like you're absolutely right. Both of them. This will have a monumental impact on their pecking order and their careers in the next 15 months. So that is, and Farrell will absolutely look to tap into that. The fact that he's bringing Sexton and he's captaining this tour just goes, listen, we know we signed the contract to the World Cup. He's kind of going, listen, he's number one, and you guys need to figure out who's number two. And then you can start working about how to manage those resources.
Just at this stage of the season, Gordon, we spoke about like Josh Cullen. Stephen Kenny referenced it last night. He's had 60 games this season. Like, what's it like for a rugby player in the middle of June to have this ahead of you? And as you mentioned, the Maori aspect to it as well. Some of these guys coming off a really long season with particularly Leinster and so on.
Yeah, it's not like, it isn't easy, because you're at this really weird balance, because you need to maintain a kind of physical element in the gym. Pitch sessions has to come right down. The volume you can do on a pitch has to come right down. So your ability to practice at a really, really intense level going into the most intense portion of the season it's really hard. And you're kind of a victim of how you perform. You will either, if you hit the ground running, you can just carry that momentum into it. But on the other side of the fence is you've got New Zealand, who are really, really well rested. They've come off the back of most of them only play half of the Super Rugby, so they're coming in super well rested, not a huge amount of game time in it under their belts, and they seem to benefit from that. And they're at the, so the energy levels is really hard. I think it was on one of the tours we had 2 games in New Zealand, and I think it was maybe somewhere in the mid 2000s with 2 games in New Zealand and 1 in Australia. And we should have won one of those 2 tests in New Zealand, and we lost them in the dying embers of the match. But we went to Australia and we were doing really well. It wasn't a particularly great Australia team, but we just ran out of gas. 55 minutes, the parachute came up and we just didn't have anything in the gas. And Australia, kind of stole it in the last 15 minutes, and that was really hard. But like, you're pretty physically broken at the end of that. And I was just thinking, if you'd add in 2 more matches into that, like you don't know where you go. And that's what I keep thinking. Like, this is a Six Nations played over 3.5 weeks.
That's 2006 that you're referring to, and it's 34-23 is the first test against New Zealand, 27-17 is the second test against New Zealand, and then 37-15 against the Wallabies is the third test. So I presume you start and play in all 3 tests. I presume come test 3, you're, even before kick-off, you're like, I'm a bit screwed here.
Not that you're a bit screwed, you're just there going like your confidence is not confidence, but the frustration of being close. And I know those scorelines don't necessarily reflect how close the games were, but we were. There was one of the I think it was the second test in particular. We gave up a try in like the last 5 or 6 minutes. But you had to carry that momentum. There, you got to travel, get on a plane, go over, and there's a physical thing. Like I think that was my 32nd game or something that season. And if you look at across the paddock, these guys were probably barely into 15 games, and that does take its toll. how they perform, like this will be all around momentum. Like Ireland need to get a win. They arguably need to win the first two matches to have a chance of doing something on that tour. There's an awful lot of pressure on New Zealand to perform as well in those two matches. But from an Irish perspective, you know, without trying to get, you know, there's a bit of a grey cloud over Irish rugby, particularly with just in the last couple of weeks with Munster's exit, and Leinster and Ulster following suit almost in consecutive weeks. But there's a huge amount of pressure on New Zealand to perform in this tour. But from Ireland for this tour not to spiral into something that you're scrambling to pick up the pieces from, they need to perform and win one of the first two matches.
Let's talk about the provincial aspect of this then. What have you seen over the last few weeks that will give you the greatest cause of concern when you take that evidence and bring it to the Ireland camp?
I think that you don't necessarily carry your form from your province into it. I suppose what would be of potentially a bit of concern would be players carrying their form into camp. And it's not across the board. I think and players missing, and they kind of name checked Kelleher and Balakoon definitely as two that are going to be missed. But I think it's more the kind of squad resources in it. And if you look, and you know, we've picked 3 number 8s in the squad, which, you know, you're playing Caelan Doris at his second best position. I think he struggled in the bigger games at playing at a 6. I don't think he is naturally a 6. So you kind of look, the only other person in the squad that's an out-and-out 6 is Peter O'Mahony. So, you know, the squad just looks, I think from players coming in with the form they're coming in, I don't think too many players are coming in on red hot form. I think Henshaw is arguably there. James Hume is arguably there. Gibson Park has been, you know, a little bit flat in the last 2 games. Ty Byrne is definitely, you know, just looks like he's a man who started nearly every game he's available for this season. And I think they're the players that tend to offer you game-breaking moments in games, and if they're a little bit flat coming into this tour, that could be a worry.
Can I ask you about Leinster then? In your piece in the Irish Times this morning, you said that Leinster remain vulnerable to big physical teams, as was evidenced over the last few weeks. Was your sense earlier in the season, Gordon, that they had corrected those vulnerabilities somewhat, and that this is maybe a little bit surprising what's transpired over the last little while?
Yeah, like I think we probably get carried away with Leinster because they're so dominant during the early part of the season, and the disrupted European Cup kind of sent over a mismatch of games. I think there's only so much you can coach yourself out of a problem. There are other teams with bigger budgets and bigger people that we're kind of leaving it more to chance that to try and be perfect on a day, and that's with the current squad, with the current way we approach the kind of match day 23. Like the only overseas player that say Leinster have is Alaa Latoa, and he's on the bench, so he's not starting. But when you look and say most other European wins, there will always be a kind of a little kind of sprinkle of just international class that can be the difference in games. And I think, you know, when Leinster's and their line-out struggled and their set-piece struggled, we didn't really have a second way to regenerate quick ball, which is the kind of fulcrum to everything that Leinster do. And we didn't have a particularly good, our kicking game isn't, to regather isn't what it used to be. Our counter-attack probably isn't as dangerous as other teams. So we struggled, and we don't have that player that you can just pop the ball to that can just generate quick ball more often than not.
Is there a sense now that what's coming through at the Leinster Academy will get them so far and will still allow them to, you know, be very, very competitive on all fronts? But that sprinkling of international class will need to be sourced from elsewhere.
Yeah, and like I think you got Jason Jenkins coming in next season, and I think he would have potentially solved this year's problems, because if you look and say when Joe McCarthy came on in against La Rochelle, he that kind of tight, he was the tighter loose headlock. He came in and he scrummaged for his life, and we didn't give up a penalty. So I think that's going to help solve one of those issues. But is that enough across the board? When we have won, there has been big players, big international players, big foreign signings that have made, have made contributions across a thing that just changed the whole dynamic of it. And I think they've also fed into players. Like, I'm a better player from playing with Felipe, better player from playing with Issa. So there's players like that, Nathan Spooner, there's guys like that just give you a different insight into how the game. So it's not just about winning matches. That's what they're primarily to do, but they do add to the way players perceive the game and interpret it. And yeah, I think to have all those players, like it would be a noble goal to win with everyone being through the Leinster Academy, but it is a good academy. I don't think it's good enough to beat bigger budgets out of France and the UK.
Like, that's quite interesting. And so like the knock-on impact of that would be interesting as well, Gordon, over the next little while, that if they do bring in maybe one or two additional signings than Jason Jenkins, just for example, the knock-on impact that would have on some of the more talented players coming through from the academy who may not necessarily be on an international class level, but would be able to bring, I'm not sure, does it bolster up their squad? Does it essentially become a case where the Leinster Academy becomes an even bigger feeder for other provinces in Ireland, or what the knock-on impact of that would be, a few more international signings for Leinster?
Yeah, but they have them next year, and I think it's the you have Jenkins. There is Charlie Naitai. If I have that name wrong, I probably do. He's coming in as a centre. He's coming in from Leon, and you have Alatoa. But there's none of those three are guaranteed to start if we were in the Champions Cup final next year. I'd say Jason Jenkins probably is just purely on size. Because the Gatlin's great quote, you can't coach a guy to be 6'8" and 130 kilos. And whether we get away from that or not, that's what Leinster needed. They needed a bit of size, because in both games, when our set piece has been disrupted, and our set piece was disrupted because we looked a little small, and then we weren't. So we were disrupted at set piece, and that had the knock-on effect across the game that we don't have like you look at what the Stormers were able to do. They were able to give the ball to Evan Roos, and he's just dynamically carrying over the gain line. Marcel Coetzee, he did the same. That is the game they're built for. But when we were asking Caelan Doris and Jack Conan to carry into South Africans off slow to medium ball, we struggled. We really, really did, because we're not built for that type. We're not put together for that type of game. We are built for that high tempo game. But we need to be able to protect for the other side, because that's what New Zealand are going to look at from that. They're going to look at the template that France did, where they disrupted our set piece in Paris for 50% of the game. They're going to look at the pressure Dan Sheehan was put over, 3 pods going up nearly every time in every line out, and put him under severe pressure. So the calling of the line out will be really important. The scrum looked shaky. Leinster's looks shaky. You've got there doesn't seem to be huge amounts experience in behind Tig. So yeah, there is concerns around that in broader context.
All right, Gordon, great stuff. Thanks a million for being with us this morning.
Thanks a million.
Cheers. Gordon Darcy there on the line, looking at that 40-man squad for Ireland, and a few Leinster reflections there as well. It is 8:38. You're with us here on OTB AM, which is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. And we're going to be speaking to Andy Moran in just a moment, but here's some more from Andy Farrell. He was speaking at yesterday's squad announcement on Kieran Frawley's prospects heading to New Zealand.
Kieran's like a number of players that's been selected in the squad. There's massive potential there, and we want to see that potential flourish under extreme pressure. And he's a type of player that we obviously want to. This tour is brilliant for, because this is what touring's all about, isn't it? We get to find out about players, how they live away from home, etc. How they're a good teammate within a squad of 40 is pretty important, and versatility whilst we're playing at the other end of the world. It's very hard to get people out there within 48 hours. So you've got to have a versatility in your group. And obviously Kieran, he can play a number of positions. He played fullback last weekend when he came on and looked pretty comfortable there. But we know he can play very well at 10 and 12 as well. Yeah, he's a few things going on in his hip there. That's muscular. It's not structural damage, which is a good thing. But the injury is said to be 4 to 6 weeks. So we had Rob in yesterday, and we was waiting on results of that, and we're gutted for him. Absolutely. We're gutted for ourselves as coaches as well, because this is the type of tour that's made for people like Rob, to show his worth on the big stage, and that's what the tour's all about. This is for us. It's the start of our World Cup campaign, and we wanted players like Rob involved in that process.
Yeah, Andy Farrell speaking at Ireland's squad announcement for the tour to New Zealand yesterday. Rob Ballacoon was who he was talking about there at the end. We're turning our attention now to Gaelic games, and delighted to welcome Andy Moran, the Leitrim manager, to the show. Andy, how are you getting on?
Hi guys, how are you doing?
Very well. So year one is down. How would you assess the successes, the highs and the lows of Leitrim in the past season?
Yeah, it was brilliant on a personal level. It was great, to be honest, and not just saying that. Just I suppose it's completely different point of view of the game for myself, from going from playing to being on the sideline in an inter-county senior at both the league and championship game, which was exciting for myself. But then in terms of the squad itself, it's been a really good year. We've came off 2 years of not winning a game, I suppose. Not all down to anyone's fault, really. COVID kind of, I believe, hits the smaller squads more than it did the more established squads that have, I suppose, lots of finances, lots of resources. So Leitrim struggled through them 2 years. So this year was a new beginning for me, new beginning for the players, and I think it was all in all a successful year. We'd have loved to have been in Croke Park this weekend. Unfortunately, we just didn't get there. But up to that point, yeah, really encouraging year. Some really nice players there, if I'm being honest with you. Really kind of good core of young guys that really want to push on, and that makes it exciting from day one.
Was there anything that surprised you about inter-county management so far? Like anything that you didn't really see coming, or anything that maybe you couldn't have prepared for?
Oh, the intensity of it.
Right.
Even now, we're out 10 days, and it's there's meetings going on. There's you're trying to prepare guys. It used to be a situation, I think, even when I first started playing, that you leave, you go back to your club, you come back in December, maybe you have to shed a few pounds, and then you go again, But now with the inter-county season, it's 12 months around the year, in terms of now, if Leitrim really want to progress, they need to go, and they need to work now hard for go back to the clubs, but maintain them S&C programs, maintain their running programs, and make sure that they're ready to. You've often heard Paddy saying on the pod that Dublin used to come back ready to train, not trying to get fit. They come back in good shape, and that's the way it's gone. People have followed Dublin's lead, Mayo's lead, Kerry's lead throughout the last few years, and now Leitrim kind of need to bridge that gap. But then the intensity of everything within the setup, between organising sessions, the bits away from training, the logistics of having guys in Dublin, Galway, Limerick, all around the country, try to organise physios, gym sessions. Just it's all encompassing, and within a county as small as Leitrim, I can't imagine how that is for the bigger managers, the Desi Farrs, the James Horns, the Jack O'Connors of this world, where they have to organise everything on a much bigger scale.
It sounds like you're almost in like operations manager territory there for the next little while, trying to get all this thing up and running. Like, do you think that the managers of the so-called bigger counties have all that responsibility in their hands as well?
Yeah, I think they probably they definitely do, and they probably over the course of it, again, like resources are huge in terms of Gaelic football. You've often heard it mentioned, I've heard it mentioned, and when you're playing, you don't really get a good sense of what's really necessary behind the scenes in terms of funding, in terms of making sure guys have enough. Making sure people, like during lockdown, making sure people have enough equipment so they can work out, being monitored well enough that you can afford to pay skilled professionals to come in and make sure all them programs are monitored. And when you're in season, then that's the key thing. And I think what the bigger counties probably have, more so than the smaller counties, if they have more resources to get more people on the ground so that they can look after more people in Leitrim and I suppose other counties within the 32, both in football and hurling, it's probably a bit tougher. But then you're working off a lower playing base, like a smaller playing base. So it probably kind of closes the gaps in that. But yeah, Dublin, Mayo, Kerry are probably just a couple of years ahead of us in regard that. But the catch up will be fun. And I suppose the key thing for me as a young manager and all our background team is that you're learning as you go along, and you're kind of you'll be ringing other guys. Even the pod last year when we talked to Rory Gallagher and Colin Collins, Joe, you'd have been taking little hints off them and little kind of guidelines off them on how you do this and how you kind of accelerate that process a bit more.
So I was just going to ask, did you pick up the phone to anyone this season as manager for a couple of nuggets of advice?
Yeah, I suppose our season was going along really nicely in terms of the way it went. Cavan and Tipperary were obviously in Division 4. They were the favourites to come out of the division. There was no kind of surprises there along the way. We played London. We done very well without Keith Byrne that day, and then we played Galway. So after the Galway game, there was a few phone calls made to maybe one or two past greats of the county. Obviously, I've John on my doorstep, which is a big help. But then there was other county managers along the way that you just ask them a little bits of advice, and you just pick it up as you're going along. So there's always little kind of interchanges between managers, and I wouldn't be ever afraid to ask for a bit of help. Believe me, you know.
How important, Andy, is the Tailteann Cup then going forward in terms of like what it gave ye in the season, what it gave other counties, and trying to lift yourself after Pearse Stadium? Like, because we'll say if you come into Leitrim jobs, so that, you know, a young manager coming in gives everyone a lift. Like, but it must be very, very hard to motivate players in other counties to keep committing to what's effectively a professional regime. So how can the Tailteann Cup be a kind of an inspiration for players going forward?
The Tailteann Cup for me, Johnny, is has a lot to build on. Do you know what I'm saying? It's got a lot more improvement to go to. I think the structure this year was okay. And then on the other side of that, I would say it's been absolutely, not the structure, Anton, but for counties like Leitrim, Sligo, even the likes of Cavan, it's been absolutely brilliant in terms of giving guys a chance. So what I mean by that is I'd love it to go to a round robin competition in 2023 in terms of ensuring that each team has three games to start off with. So the likes of Antrim, when they came down and played us, that was a knockout game. So Antrim had to wait 6 or 7 weeks when they lost to Cavan. Then they come down and play us. Now all of a sudden they're out. Where we were lucky enough to win that game, and then we had another game. But if everyone was insured 3 games, you're on about development, Johnny. Over this year, we've had 11 games, league and championship, 4 championship, 7 league. That's more than the last 2 years put together. Fellas can't improve unless you're playing games. Managers, we've got a young guy there for Leitrim called Jordan Reynolds. Okay, Jordan had never played for Leitrim. He'd never actually won a game for Leitrim right through 16s, minors, 20s. And he won his first game with a Leitrim jersey on him against Antrim. But if we didn't have that game, we wouldn't have seen him again this year. Do you know what I'm saying? That was his first game of the year. He'd injuries earlier on in the year, wasn't fit enough to tug out against Galway. But then all of a sudden he was ready against Antrim, came on just after half time, and then played the whole second half and extra time against Sligo. And now the whole county is talking about this young guy that we didn't know about 4 weeks ago. Do you know, that's the key thing. It builds a kind of confidence within the guys that they can do it moving forward. We got knocked out of the championship the day after Monaghan get knocked out of the championship. Already that gives us a chance, because if Leitrim get knocked out 4 or 5 weeks before Monaghan, you lose a full month of coaching your guys. Monaghan get a 5-week head start. Already a huge gap between ourselves and Monaghan, but to get another 5-week head start going into 2023. So where's the chance to catch up? The Tailteann Cup gives the Cavans, the Sligos, the Westmeads and the Offaly's the chance to keep training right through the summer, have a smaller gap for pre-season, and then all of a sudden then go again to push on in 2023. And I think the championship in a whole, Johnny, will get fundamentally better as the Tailteann Cup gets stronger. And I think the difference this time between the Tommy Murphy and the Tailteann Cup is that managers and players have really, really bought into it. Like, for example, our team, when we got knocked out against Galway, nobody left the squad. That's nothing down to me being this, that, or the other. That's because the guys knew that competitive games coming, that they could compete. And then last, and sorry for the long-winded answer, and then last week against Sligo, you go down to Pork Sean and Carrick on Shannon. There's 5,000 people at the match. The place is absolutely, like, I'm not just saying this, I genuinely am just saying this, as good as atmosphere as I ever played in, and I was on the sideline, it was amazing seeing the Leitrim people, listening to the Leitrim people after the game saying the kids were at the game for the first time since they got to the league final in 19. The excitement was kind of back at it. Sligo and Mayo, pitch invasion after the game. It was just incredible to see. And that's the beauty of having games against teams that you can compete against at your own level.
That's exactly what you want it to be, like, you know. And it's just like I don't like people poo-pooing the idea of a competition because it isn't the All Ireland, because I think games between the likes of Leitrim and Sligo can be very enjoyable and what they mean to the local people. And it's only in its infancy, and we're trying to break a long tradition here. And I think it'll really take off. I hope it does.
Yeah, but Johnny, on that, I will say wait till you see Sunday in Croke Park. Wait till you see Sunday in Croke Park. It will be unbelievable. It'll be better than the product that was put in place last Saturday. Even though the quality of the football will be better last Saturday with Kildare, Mayo and Roscommon and Clare, what we'll see in terms of atmosphere, enthusiasm, kicking the ball, players trying to be the best, will be a better product, I believe, on Sunday than what we produced last Saturday. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. You look at the Championship, the League One playoffs, the League Two playoffs in soccer. Sure, they're some of the best games of the year, even though the quality mightn't be as good, but the excitement and the drama and the atmosphere creates a great product.
Well, that's a really interesting point, because I was just going to ask about that when you mentioned the 5,000 strong crowd in Carrick and how that made for a brilliant atmosphere. You clearly think that these games on Sunday should be played in Croke Park, and I guess for Tailteann Cup teams maybe it's different, but the suggestion was last Saturday that if you brought those exact same games out of Croke Park to a provincial ground, they would have been much better, even if you had the same teams going up against each other. Like, is it different this Sunday when you have teams who don't regularly play in Croke Park and that they should be played there, or did that Carrick experience make you kind of think twice about that, thinking, God, these provincial grounds do have a rocking atmosphere?
I think you answered the question, didn't you? No, I think the Tailteann Cup is different. For the likes of Sligo and Leitrim last weekend, the draw was to play in Croke Park.
Okay.
That's where the excitement was, because, like, you look at an Emblem Mulligan type figure. He's played over 100 times for Leitrim, which is not nearly half enough, if I'm being honest. But he played nearly 100 times for Leitrim, and he's played one time in Croke Park in the league final in Division 4. You know, so the draw was to get to Croke Park and to show the guys that there's club football, there's county football, and then there's Croke Park football, and to show them that, like, these are three nearly different competitions, different games, and to get them used to that, kind of pace of the game. And the big disadvantage for someone like Leitrim is that Sligo now go and play there, and they'll see a game played at a whole different level, a whole different pace, and then we have to play them next year in Division 4. So I would say it's different. Last weekend, Owen, totally agree with you. I was in Croke Park, and it was literally, when you see the seagulls flying in. Like, I remember doing runs after a game one time when I didn't play enough minutes, and doing runs after the game, and it was just, the seagulls were down on the pitch. And during the game last week at halftime, in the second half, there was that little people in the place that it looked like that at times, and it was just a really surreal atmosphere. But for the Tailteann Cup, I think there'd be 30 or 40,000 people at this. I think it'd be a great atmosphere.
No, that's really interesting, because I wasn't sure how much of an incentive it was inside the camps, because it's like something that's spoken about so much. It's like, oh, Emlyn Mulligan never gets to play in Croke Park, and I'm like, does he himself think that actually the Carrick atmosphere is something that he wants and has that championship feel? But clearly not. And just kind of on top of that then, and along the same theme, that if you just focus on like the win against Antrim, Andy, like how does that feel as a manager, as a group, compared to, say, I don't know, being involved with a big win for Mayo in Croke Park? Is it on the same level? Is it absolutely nerve-wracking? Is it on the same level of ecstasy when you get over the line as anything would have been with your Mayo days? Or how do those experiences compare?
Oh yeah, it's way worse in terms of nerves, in terms of pressure. Like when you are playing, you actually have some resemblance of control on the game. Joe, you can actually affect the game. So you're on the pitch when you're on the sideline. Your work is done when the guys cross the white line. So very kind of like I'd probably get involved in the game. Maybe that's a bit of an experience, but I'd get involved kind of in the game as well in terms of being encouraging, directing and stuff like that. So you kind of lose yourself in the moment as well. But the pressure of the game is huge as a manager. I'll tell you what's a huge pressure, lads, and you asked me what it's like. But when you play a game against Antrim and you need to turn around then for 7 days and play against Sligo like it happened last week, and you need to get the video analysis done on the Antrim game, then you need to get the video done on the Sligo game. You need to talk to the guys that mightn't be too happy that they didn't play. You need to talk to the guys that did well. That 48, 72 hours from Sunday through to Wednesday evening is absolute maniac stuff, to be honest with you, in terms of pressure, in terms of just making sure that you have all the right people to talk to, and you're trying to pick a team then for the following week, try to analyse what Sligo might be weak and strong at. Like, that was just huge, and huge learning for us. But the pressure of the game, Eoin, is huge, and completely different than when you were a player.
How do you approach that conversation with the lads who are unhappy with the minutes that they got at the weekend?
Yeah, I suppose at the start, like I was probably kind of flapping around it a tiny bit in terms of when you're talking to the boys you're trying not to hurt feelings and you're trying not to do it. But then, like, I kind of analysed it after the first couple of times I did it, and I just, honesty is the only way to go. You have to be honest. You've got to know the reasons why you're not doing it. And I think if you're honest with guys, I think 9 out of 10 times fellas just go, okay, that's fair enough. I'll try to work on that. They'll be very disappointed. Kind of when you're not making 26s, sometimes you're a tiny bit embarrassed by that. I don't mean that in a bad way, but you're going back to your family, your clubs, and you need to kind of be really respectful towards that as well. But honesty is the only way to go about it. It's I think it's the only way to kind of, if you want to kind of keep the respect with the players, I think if you're being honest with them. And I remember when I was a manager, or when I was a player, getting a phone call one time asking a manager why am I playing, and he just turned around and he goes, Andy, we need you for the last 20, not the first 20. And I just kind of went, well, that's fair enough. I said, what do you say to that? You say, listen, he still wants me, he still needs me, but it's not the way I wanted to do it. It's not 70 minutes. But if people are just honest with you, I think it's the best way to go.
I remember you as an underage soccer player, but do you have sympathy for Stephen Kenny just having to deal with this, I don't know, this hysteria over a couple of results? Like,
it's mad, isn't it? It's but I see it, Johnny. I see it here with James Horn. The pressure is just enormous in terms of football. Like, our culture in terms of management, we've always, us, like, Mayo's always been a mad football county, like insane football county. But since that run started in 2011, the pressures on managers have just, it's gone through the roof. And I got to know Andy during the year. We went up to Meath a couple of times for a few challenge matches. Got to know Andy, terrific guy, and the pressure he was under as a manager, and it's just it's enormous, and it's something that I think an advantage of being a modern player, like that I'm not finished too long. I kind of understood that pressure kind of going into it, but now it's still up a few notches than what I expected. But the top counties are under that much pressure now to get results. It's huge, and Stephen Kenny is just on a whole different level altogether.
You talk about that pressure, and that must be one of the frustrating aspects then when you come away from that game 2 weeks ago knowing that a decision to an extent does you out of a place in Croke Park this weekend. that ratcheting up the pressure all season long and knowing that something's kind of taken out of your hands like that. And it was a significant moment, Andy, the square ball decision against you to rule out that goal at the start of extra time. How do you process that in the aftermath, especially when something like that is out of your control?
Yeah, the funny thing about that one, Owen, it was Shane Moran that put the ball in the net, and Shane is 29, I'd say, 29 years of age, and really smart. Like, you know, really, his key strength is that he's a really smart footballer. And I was just thinking to myself, there's no way he's got inside the box, you know, for a square ball. But listen, there's decisions within the game. These things happen. Very, very frustrating. I won't lie to you, especially in extra time. We had scored 4 on the bounce to get us back level. Jordan had scored a terrific point. Keith kicked a whirly altogether to put us level. And then the next score, actually, just after extra time, was the goal. So we'd have scored 1-4 on the bounce, which would have put Sligo under huge, huge pressure, you know. So, frustrating. But the game could have been won and lost within fine margins and within the game, and we could have lost or we could have won it. And listen, it's a refereeing decision. It went against us. Very, very disappointed. It'd be great. It'd be unbelievable to be going playing Cavan this week in Croke Park, but it didn't happen. But what I would say is, when you're kind of analysing the game, and I found myself doing this maybe earlier in the week, you forget the great things that are just after happening. As I said to you, the kids at the game, they're coming in asking the likes of Keith, Byrne, Ryan O'Rourke, these guys for their autograph after the game. You know, the guys getting standing ovations coming off the pitch, both the Sligo and Leitrim supporters absolutely bouncing out the gate. So you can totally kind of focus on the result, which is important, or look at what's just after happening within the county of Leitrim, and the love of football kind of is back. Is back to where it should be. And for me, you always kind of, coming from a Mayo setup, you always kind of symbol where the team is at when you see the kids at the pitch. And if the kids want to meet their heroes, you know, that's the job of any footballer, is to make sure that you leave something that the kids want to replicate into the future. And all of a sudden, these guys are doing it, you know.
Absolutely. This weekend then it's Croke Park, it's Sligo against Cavan in the curtain raiser at 1:45, and Westmeath against Offaly at 4 o'clock, the Tailteann Cup semi-finals obviously. Who do you see coming out of them, Andy? You've seen a few of them up close and personal in Division 4 and in the Tailteann Cup this season, and who do you see going all the way?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Coming out of Division 4, you probably wouldn't have picked Cavan because they played well, but they just did enough. You know, they just did enough to get through every game. It was kind of like they kept everyone at arm's length. They never really exploded. But then to go out and play a team that had a really good Division 3 in Antrim and destroy them. And then you see, like, okay, so you can take away and you can look at Armagh Donegal result last week and say, oh, Armagh hammered Donegal. But in reality, there was a 25-minute period there in the first half where Donegal absolutely ripped Armagh asunder, you know, and I don't mean that disrespectfully to Armagh. Donegal played outstanding football, Thompson kicking points, Murphy kicking points, Joe, and it was just lovely to watch. Ryan McHugh kicked outside the foot one. It was just lovely. And then you have to analyse then the Cavan got really, really close to Donegal, you know, and so you'd have to say Cavan have the form coming into it, and I think Cavan will probably just kind of sneak the whole competition. Now, saying that, we've seen Offaly, most of their second team in a challenge during the year, and I know John has done terrific work with them. I seen Westmeath playing against Mayo last year in Division 2, a game that they probably should have won up in Cusack Park. So they've got real talent there as well. And the thing about Westmeath, I would say, is the pace they have up front. They could be the team to kind of watch to get within 3 points of Kildare in the Leinster. So it's a real tough one to analyse. But I would say that Cavan probably have the edge. I would just say they probably have the edge. Winning the 2020 Ulster, I think they're really kind of. I think Jack, John, Tony, and Mickey Graham have really kind of went after this tournament. So I think if they've really focused in on it, Cavan should sneak it. But I think it's going to be a really tough test from this week and the following weekend in the final. Yeah,
hopefully we've got 3 cracking games left in the competition. Just one last thing, Andy. Mayo on Saturday, they had a fairly mixed performance but got a positive result in the end. It is deja vu. We have seen this time and time again. We've seen this from teams that you played in, where through the back door they look so unimpressive and then they find themselves back in an All-Ireland final. So what would your message be to the people who are looking at that Mayo performance on Saturday and writing them off already ahead of their quarter-final?
See, the Mayo boys, particularly the guys that have been there a long time, know that they're not playing well. They wouldn't be dressing it up, like they wouldn't be turning around saying, "Oh, well, we got the result," and blah blah blah. They know they're not playing well. Like everyone that was at that game the last day, even the comeback was okay. It wasn't to the standard they want to play at. But it's the draw, lads, that Mayo would have wanted, and I don't mean that kind of patronising towards the players or anything like that. I mean it's now you either play or you get bet. You either play or it's all over. It's like there's no way about it. Mayo could play really, really well against Kerry and still lose. But they have to know the performance levels have to go up. There's no more excuses. And I think what happened with them teams in 16, 17 was that when we got to the point, then we could kind of up it. When we got to Croke Park, we could up the level, the speed, the skill level that we need to play at. And we're just hoping as Mayo people that they do the same thing. I think it's a very dangerous game for Kerry. I think it's probably in the point now where, like Kerry haven't played a game since round 6 of the league. They played the last league game, which was dead rubber. They played Mayo in the final, which wasn't really a game. Cork put it up to them for 50, but you always thought Kerry now are going to pull away. Limerick have played. So they haven't really played a game since round 6. So Mayo not playing well, still beat two Division 1 teams to get to a quarter final. And I like Kerry should win the game, but I do genuinely think Mayo have a chance of going upsetting it. I think people kind of have short memories at times too. I think like Dublin obviously not playing to their highest standard, last year. But I think they were 10-4 up at half time. I think they got to 14 and then they never scored. And Mayo got on this momentum train like we love to get on. And all of a sudden started clipping away at Dublin and brought them to extra time and won the game. And Kerry on form should win, but I think it's a great draw for Mayo. I genuinely think it's a great draw.
Do you think any of the shadow boxing of the league game will stand to them here in that like they'll have learned much from that? Or do you think James Horan is thinking we might meet them in the championship and I'll know a lot more then? I
don't buy that narrative, Johnny, about the league final. I think Mayo went hell for leather to win that league final. I think the only difference in it is that Kerry are the fastest team. Kerry or Dublin of 5-6 years ago, the fastest team in the whole competition. And in that final, no Oisin Mullen, no Paddy Durcan, no McLaughlin. Obviously, Tommy Conroy wasn't playing because he's out for the year.
No Killian, essentially.
But like Killian's greatest asset was never his pace. But them four guys I mentioned are absolute speed merchants. So now all of a sudden you've Gavin White running, but you don't have a Paddy Durcan or no McLaughlin to go after him. So, essentially, Johnny, is that Kerry essentially ran us out the gate that day, and then you have the brilliance of Clifford then on top of it. So now at least Mayo will have pace to match pace in key areas, and then you can see then are they good enough to go and win. As I said, they probably shouldn't, but that day in the National League final, Kerry were just too fast for Mayo. In every asset of the game, we lost way too much speed. Mayo lost way too much speed, and the fellas we had to replace them are really, really good footballers, but they're a different footballer. They'd be kind of like me, and as Owen mentioned there, Killian, they'd be the slower, kind of more skillful kind of player, where against Kerry, if you don't have someone to mark Brian O'Bugley, you've no one to mark Gavin White, you've no one to mark Paddy Clifford, Dara Moynihan, these guys, they'll just run out around you. So at least the next day when Mayo go to Croke Park, they'll have speed to match speed, and then you see, have they enough about them up front to go and win the game.
Do you still listen to the football pod, or is that like texting your ex?
I would know, absolutely. As I often said, I'm jealous that O'Donoghue is so good, the little whore, but he's it's brilliant. I listened to the one yesterday. I was actually really surprised how and thank God for Tommy Rooney. I won't say that too often, but thank God for him. At least he stood up for me a bit. But the two boys were very big on Kerry yesterday. And rightly so. Kerry, in my opinion, I've been saying it for a couple of years, should go and win this All-Ireland and possibly All-Irelands then after. But until they do it, there's pressure on them. And I honestly think if any team can put a squeeze on them, it's Mayo. Now, Mayo's performance level needs to go way up. But the two boys, we'll be having words with them, both Paddy and Jamesy. They were very, very, very big on Kerry. But I think it's a real dangerous game for Kerry. I think all the pressure every bit of the pressure is on Kerry. Me, you, Johnny, the two boys in the pod would all say Kerry should win, they will win, whatever. But that puts huge pressure on you. And like Jack O'Connor has a job in his hands in the next 10 days to make sure them boys don't get caught up with a bit of complacency going into the game.
Andy Moran, a pleasure chatting to you as ever. Thanks a million for taking the call.
Thanks for having me, lads.
It's Leitrim boss Andy Moran there on the line. The Tailteann Cup finals, of course, in Croke Park this Sunday. Thank God for Tommy Rooney bringing some Mayo balance to proceedings. Colin Mullaney is with us in the studio. Colin, how are you getting on?
Lads, how's it going?
All good. What is happening in the world of sport?
Well, just some breaking news. The Republic of Ireland women's national team squad has been announced. Some of the headlines from it, it's just been announced the last couple of minutes. Goalkeeper Naisha McAloon included for the first time, and Diane Caldwell and Stephanie Roach also returned to the Irish squad. Ireland play the Philippines in a friendly on Sunday. That's as part of a training camp that's taking place in Turkey, and they play a crucial World Cup qualifier against Georgia on Monday week, and that's away to Georgia on Monday week, and they're beginning their preparations this week. So that squad just announced in the last couple of minutes. The men's team, of course, played out a 1-1 draw with Ukraine in the Nations League last night. Nathan Collins with the goal there for Stephen Kenny's side. Elsewhere in the group, Scotland beat Armenia by 4-1 in Yerevan. England suffered their heaviest home defeat since 1928 last night. They were hammered 4-0 by Hungary at Molineux, and they also had John Stones sent off. England now bottom of their League A group and in danger of relegation. Things not going too well for Wales either. They thought they'd salvaged a draw last night with a late goal from Gareth Bale, but a 93rd minute winner from Memphis Depay gave the Netherlands a 3-2 win. And Darwin Núñez says it's a pleasure to sign for Liverpool. He's moved on a 6-year deal from Benfica. That deal costing Liverpool an initial €75 million, could rise to as much as €100 million. In swimming, Ireland will bid for another medal at the World Para Swimming Championships in Madeira later today. Roisin Rian back in the pool. That's for the final of the 100 metre backstroke S13 event. Nicole Turner is celebrating a third place finish in the 200 metre individual medley SM6 final last night. The Portarlington swimmer took bronze and will feature again in Madeira later in the week. And there's racing at Wexford this evening. The first of a 7-race card goes off at 5:20.
Very quickly, who's your tip for the US Open?
I'm going to say Rory.
Rory?
Nice. He looked so good last week, so let's hope he can continue.
Yeah, it'll be a hell of a week if he manages to do it. Colin Mullaney, great stuff as ever.
Lads.
Thanks a million. All right, OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. And we've got plenty coming up on OTB Sports Radio throughout the day as ever. From 1 o'clock, OTB Gold is coming your way. It's an Irish football special with Shay Given, Niall Quinn, Jason McAteer and Kevin Kilban. Nia Fahy and an interview with her is Coy Gig from 3 o'clock. Retro panel telling it like it is from 4. 6 o'clock is OTB Gold with Cullen Gooch Cooper, and then Off the Ball is live on your radio from 7 o'clock tonight. You can follow Off the Ball across all of our social channels. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can download the OTB Sports app for the latest and best in sports content and analysis. Now, during this next ad break, you'll hear a clip from the latest episode of the Football Pod, where the lads debated if Mayo were being written off too early. The Football Pod is brought to you by AIB, proud sponsors of the GEA Senior Football Championship. Check out #TheToughest for more. We're back after these, but more reaction to Ireland's draw last night alongside Damien Delaney.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Newspapers have called it the greatest club game ever.
Munster legends Alan Quillan and Niamh Briggs are joining forces to bring you all the latest analysis, news, interviews and so much more.
The strength of Munster rugby has always been the big boys up front. There's a lot of pressure on these guys continuously.
I'm actually really excited for it.
The Red 78 with Alan Quillan and Niamh Briggs. Available every Wednesday. Don't miss a moment of action. Subscribe to the rugby channel on the OTB Sports app and turn on your notifications now.
And for Mayo to have any chance, they've got to get a handle on there. Eoin needs to get back to the form of 12 months ago. Aidan O'Shea, we praised him against Monaghan. Thought he was excellent at Castlebar. Didn't have much of an impact on Saturday. He comes off with 10 minutes on the clock, or 10 minutes to go. That's a big area that Mayo, they need to get at least parity there. Do Mayo push up and try and go after Shane Ryan's kickouts, which I expect they will. But if they lose it, they need to get bodies back quickly. And the one thing Mayo don't lack, and they never have lacked, is that athleticism and that energy.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you're writing off Mayo this quickly.
Anytime you write off Mayo, but they'll come back and they'll give Kerry their Lazarus-like recoveries again.
I'm surprised.
But I cannot see it this time.
Yeah, I don't know. You saw all 4 beaten provincial finalists lose at the weekend. That little bit of momentum that those games have, I find it hard to not read into that. I just think there's something in it. It's going to give them extra 5-10%.
Mentality,
definitely.
They've got 2 weeks going in there. Everyone's writing them off. We're already.
Yeah.
No one is going to give them a prayer.
I'm not.
Get Ryan O'Donoghue back. They won't fear Kerry.
No, I totally agree. I
just think quality-wise, I think this Mayo team is not as good as the Mayo teams in 16, 17.
Yeah.
They've still got phenomenal mentality, and you can never knock them on that. But quality-wise, particularly up front, I just think they do not have the scoring power. Particularly take on a shootout like Kerry.
Marginal gains? XG? Top speed? Recovery? What's it all about? Want to improve but don't know where to start? With more data than ever now available, OTB Sports have teamed up with Whoop to cut through the noise and help you raise your game, no matter the sport. OTB Sports are delivering the metrics that matter. Meaningful metrics in partnership with Whoop, the personalised digital fitness and health coach that helps you unlock your inner potential. See whoop.com for more. Follow OTB Sports social channels for the best insights and stats this season.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
It's 9:15. You're very welcome back. So the end of Ireland's June international window has finished with 1 win, 1 draw and 2 defeats. They sit on 4 points in their League B division. Scotland are on 6 points, Ukraine are on 7 points, so Ireland are in third place, 1 point clear of Armenia. Last night though was all about Nathan Collins. I'm delighted to welcome Damien Delaney to the show. Damien, how are you getting on?
Hey lad, how are you?
A lot of fluctuating opinions on how much we should be excited about Nathan Collins after last night. Where do you stand?
Really excited. I'm really excited to see him grow and get better in this window. Last night he was exceptional. I really like him in the middle of a back three. If we're going to persist with this, he's. I know Shane Duffy has an awful lot of strength, and he's been the main man for us for years. And he probably will remain the starting middle centre back. But I think Nathan Collins holds a much higher line. Not afraid to go into the midfield, even though he's the middle of three. I think Shane plays a position slightly different when he's the deepest one. He's almost, not a sweeper, it's probably too harsh a word, but he tends to be a little deeper than the other two. Whereas last night, Nathan Collins nearly all the time was level with the other two centre-backs. And it gave us a much better starting position. And helped them. Obviously, the three midfielders helped as well. So maybe that's a touch unfair on Shane Duffy, because when we only play with two midfielders in there, the opposition midfield players at times. So maybe Shane does have to drop off and give himself a few yards. But I suppose when there was three in there and there was more pressure on the Ukrainian midfield players, Nathan Collins was able to hold a high line. So maybe that point isn't as valid. But I still liked the way he played.
What's your gut feeling? And maybe like in terms of what you're actually seeing in terms of analysis as well, of where Collins' ceiling will actually be?
Oh, that's up to him. I think he's got every attribute to go as far as he wants. He's got pace, he's got power, he loves the tackle, can head it. I think he's got pretty much everything. We saw last night with his goal how good he is on the ball. Remarkably technical player. So he's still so young as well, and he obviously has leadership qualities. And he's finding his feet nicely at club level. Be interested to see how the summer goes for him. Maybe he can get that move. I'm not sure. I know a company coming in at Burnley, what their financial situation is. Maybe they have to offload him, which could be a good thing for him, because I think there'll be a host of Premier League teams, top half Premier League teams, looking to take him on board. Yeah,
just on that, Damien, like that performance last night, it's hard to marry that performance with the lad who's going to play for a year in the Championship, particularly with the trajectory of him getting more game time. As a centre back, like, what would you advise him in terms of if he said to you, like, okay, I'm going to get a good Premier League offer here, or I can play at a Championship team that is far from guaranteed to actually get promoted as well?
Obviously, he wants to play, and he has to play at the highest level possible. Now, his situation at Burnley, depending on how it unfolds, I think Burnley would have to sell him if the rumours or the reports about their financial situation and being plunged into such extreme debt pretty much overnight are true, then I'm pretty sure that they will look to offload any asset that they have, and needs most certainly an asset. His performance last night will have caught the eye around Europe against a pretty good Ukrainian team. So I think he'll go, but if he doesn't, and Burnley do manage to find some cash or stave off the loan repayments, whatever their situation is, and he stays, then he just has to do the best he can in the championship. And he is a top player, and he's young enough that he will have that hunger to churn out 46 games. He's been in the championship with Stoke before, so he knows what it takes. But I think that him and his advisors, his agent, and his family will certainly be looking to get that move, especially if there's, mid to upper level teams, maybe such as the Wolves or someone like that, might be very interested in him. Perhaps there'll be teams higher that look at developing him, but at this stage, he's played so many games, he just needs to continue playing.
He was if it were 14 million or whatever it was, like you do wonder what he's worth now. But I don't know if you saw his interview after the game, David. I thought it was just so refreshing. Like, he was just like a lad who was happy with life. He said he was tired after 4 games. Didn't really make much of the goal, as if he couldn't really remember it. But what really shone for me was he just said, I just enjoy playing football. I enjoy playing football. And that was like exactly what he did.
We all did that at that age, to be honest with you. I was interviewing a man unscarred by life in football. but I think he'll get there, don't worry. He'll grow cynical like myself one day.
Like that point that you made earlier on, Damien, about him having the capability to do these sorts of things because he's playing in a back three is kind of on point. And I think that's like the goal, for example, as we were discussing earlier on. It's hard to see somebody playing as one of 2 centre backs actually making that burst forward and having that capability to actually make that stamp on the attack in the team. So when you're looking at this going forward, obviously Nathan Collins is an absolute banker to start as long as he's fit and as long as he's playing football. So how do you see the rest of that defence being structured around him if you had to guess for the September window? And we can make the assumption here, Damien, that everybody's fit.
Yeah, look, I think, when you saw him step in like that, I think that comes for the goal. That comes, as a byproduct of us having 3 players in midfield, that the back 3 can hold a high line. I mean, it is hard to envisage Shane Duffy stepping in that far, although Shane can go tight, don't get me wrong. But I would like to see Nathan Collins continue in the middle of back 3 if that's the system that we're going to persist with 3 centre-backs. Obviously, we're flush with right-backs and centre-backs, so I think Nathan Collins will almost certainly be in the team. I think the manager obviously likes Shane Duffy for his leadership skills and what he brings to the team. So I think Shane will probably remain in the middle of a back 3. I think Nathan Collins will play on the right side. And then left side will probably be John Egan, even though we have the likes of Dara O'Shea and Omar Bombadeli and who's the other one I'm missing? Lenihan as well, who done reasonably well last night. Yeah, so look, I think the back 3 will be that. But I think moving forward for Ireland, I think Nathan Collins, at being the young age that he is, I think could play in anything. And what I really like about him is I think he can play in a back 2 as well if we do revert to a back 4, because he has that mobility and he has that pace, I suppose, to play in a back 2. But look, the guy looks like he's capable of playing right back or probably playing number 6 as well. He looks that talented. So if you did need him to do a stint as a defensive midfielder, I'm pretty sure he could do that too.
Is it the populist thing now, though, to say like Omar Bombadeli, were he to continue his progress, Dara O'Shea, and obviously Collins, who has to start, and you're talking that Collins really should be playing the centre. Like, if we play Duffy, and I'm not sure Egan necessarily is good enough now to start if these players continue their trajectory, but the Duffy situation, we saw this Saturday demo, like if you have a player who's consistently prone to giving the ball away in such bad areas, like it's surely a problem for us when every team knows that they just like put traps out for Duffy and they will expose us.
Yeah, that's a fair enough point, but I still think Shane has been pretty impeccable in an Irish jersey. Over the years, he's given great service. He's still such a big character, but I think his club situation will obviously need to iron itself out as well. Because if Nathan Collins is playing regularly, even in the Championship, a Burnley team that's at the top end of the league, and he's playing well, John Egan will be playing at Sheffield United, and obviously I think Dara O'Shea at West Brom and Dara Lenihan looks like he's sealed a big move to Middlesbrough, who they'll definitely be competing as well. And if Shane is in and out of the Brighton team, or he doesn't manage to get himself a move, then it could be awkward for Shane. But look, I think Shane and his experience will be such a big player for Ireland moving forward, both on and off the pitch. But these are nice decisions. I know that you're going to say that like they're difficult decisions, but believe me, managers pray for issues like this. Obviously, he's the one that has to make the decision and get it right, and he's the one that has informed certain players that they won't be playing, because we've got 5-6 players that are capable of starting at centre back.
The goal Ireland conceded last night came from Ukraine getting in down the left-hand side of Ireland's defence in behind McLean, and then obviously there were a number of chances down the right-hand side of Ireland's defence. So when you bring into account the question around Ireland's wing-backs at the moment and Ireland's system, how much do those moments last night give you cause for concern?
Yeah, I think the goal last night, just after half-time, was just a result of getting caught cold. I think it was Colin tried to just read a ball slightly in front of Zinchenko, and he spun off the back of him, and then it went into the big centre forward chest layoff. I wouldn't expect James McLean to be back level there. He's not playing left back; he's playing left wing back. That's why you play three centre backs, because otherwise you end up with a flat back five, and it becomes very, very difficult. So I don't think there's any manager, especially when you're ahead in the game and you're doing reasonably well, would expect James McLean to be part of a flat back five there really and be alongside Dara O'Shea. That's the point of playing three centre backs, is you can release the wing backs to be a threat on the opposite side. So look, we just got caught a little bit cold. I wouldn't read too much into it, but I do think there are flaws in the system overall. When you look at the Armenia game and the Ukraine game at home, and he's going to have to earn it out, because even though we reverted last night to we pressed it well at times, but also we had to drop back into a flat back five when they had good possession. And it became 5-3-2. I'm not sure that system is conducive to playing good football or to be able to retain the ball reasonably well, because your wing backs are going to get pinned in at times when the opposition have a lot of the ball. So it's something he's going to have to look at, because, as I said, the first two games did not go well.
Am I sensing here that you think that a back four is very much a live prospect?
That's just my personal preference. Yeah. If I was coaching, flat back four with two number sixes, we have Cullen and Malumbi, and then you can get a 10 in the pitch, and you can even invert your wingers. That's my own personal preference. I just think that we're caught really in an awkward place, and he's jumped from 3-4-3 to kind of a 3-4-2-1, and now we're playing 5-3-2. So I think he's still trying to figure out what's best. I really liked his version of the system when the opposite wide player tucked in on the number 6 to help out the midfield players. I thought that was quite nice, and I wouldn't be too disappointed if that was the system. But he needs to start settling now on a system, because he's been in the job, I think, 26 games. I think I'm right in saying that last night was his 26th game. So we're getting a full picture now of Stephen Kenny's Ireland. We had obviously a lot of issues with COVID and the changing of the style. But I think it's time now to start looking at the whole picture and where we're at and where we're going. He's had long enough to implement his so-called change. And he's had long enough now where all his players have been available to him post-COVID. So I think we are getting to the stage though where we can start judging him very fairly. I think he has had a generous amount of time without too much criticism coming his way. But when you look at results like Armenia and Ukraine at home, I was on the fence coming in before this group of fixtures. So things need to change really, and we need to start beating the likes of Armenia, and we need to start getting a settled system as well, not kind of jumping from one to the other.
Do you not think though, I think, Hogan we basically 10 players in Hogan last night, and if you play Obafemi up top with Parrott last night, Parrott for me, I thought he just looked very good at times, and he's had a good window, particularly as the games go on. But if Obafemi's up there, Ukraine to me looked jittery at the back. I think we win that game.
Yeah, okay, but then where's this change in style there then, Johnny, if we're just going to sit back in, defend on the edge of our box and just lump it up?
I'm not saying that though. I'm not saying that, because they dovetail very well in general play at times. Obviously the goal on Saturday, I think we've more to our game than that. I think that you have the option then of going long, but we can pass the ball quite well, and we did finish the game very well, but we were carrying a player for 60 minutes.
Yeah, like I said, these are questions that the manager needs to start nailing down now. I feel that last night was a touch defensive. I mean, we've done reasonably well in the first half. It was 50-50. Probably deserved just about to go in ahead, but I think they had a pretty good second half. They dominated the ball and were probing, and then obviously we finished the game reasonably strong. So I think a draw was probably a fair result last night out there. The pitch looked very lively as well. I could see the ball just bouncing. It looked really, really hard. So maybe that was a factor of that needs to be taken into account as well. But Yeah, I take your point, Johnny. It's not
I think very briefly there are no easy answers to this. And Damo's point, we need to settle on a system. We need to settle on what team it is. But I can't, with any confidence, give you my best Irish 11 at all. And probably 2 or 3 lines of that I'm not even sure of.
Can I actually just ask, like, just on the system, like, there's obviously like a slight disagreement here on that. Like, Damien, you're saying that actually because it's a back 3, it turns into a back 5, and that is something that's not going to be progressive enough for Ireland. Is that your point in a nutshell?
Yeah, because I think when he played this in the game, I remember talking about this. Like when you play with 3-5-2, right? I always believe 3-5-2 is a possession-based system, right? So you need to retain the ball, and your wing backs then have time to get up the pitch and become wingers, right? That means your 3 in midfield have to dominate the ball. That's the essential kind of bones of that system. If you don't dominate the ball, right, then their wide players are just going to run forward, and your wing backs will go back, and it becomes a flat back 5 then, and you have 3 in midfield, which gives up the wings because their full backs become quite prominent. And you saw that in the game last night, that they had a lot of joy. And all of a sudden they start dominating the ball, and when they start dominating the ball and you're caught in a back 5, it can be very, very hard to get out. And the only out ball is what Johnny's talking about there, is a big lump, or not big lump, but a long ball up. And we had a lot of joy off that in the first half. I was counting in the studio, there must have been a dozen long balls where there was a flick on from Parrott or Hogan, and they did link up quite well, but it was very, very back to front. So again, I think he only went to that because he wanted to keep a back 3 in place, but he realised that 2 in midfield doesn't work, so he had to get a third midfield player in. So it just seems like the system built itself, if you understand what I'm saying, where I want to keep 3 centre-backs, I need 3 in midfield. Well, that's 3-5-2. Let's play 3-5-2, as opposed to any real thought went into it. Maybe that's unfair. Not any real thought went into it, but it just didn't. It looked like it was just kind of thrown in at the last minute. And I'm not a big fan of 3-5-2. I'm a traditionalist. I like 3 flat back 4, really, where your full backs can join in, and 1 or 2 defensive midfield players. So look, I think there's, that's what Stephen played his whole career at Dundalk, was that system. So this is a new system that Stephen's been playing, and he talked before the game about being able to be adaptive and drop in and out of systems. But like I said, there's still an awful lot of questions to be answered.
That's really interesting. Just one last word on England, actually, before we let you go, Damien. I actually caught none of this last night, but was kind of following the hysteria on Twitter, the fact that the players got booed at the end. What happened last night?
Look, I mean, Hungary are a very, very slick outfit now. That manager, Marco Rossi, has really made them an incredibly difficult team to get at. They defended numbers. And then they are one of the most efficient teams on the break that you're likely to see. I mean, they must have had 5 breakaways and scored 4 goals. They were that good on the break. And the captain, Zaloy, at the top of the pitch is a good focal point for them. And then they've got some serious legs. In England, Gareth Southgate's interview afterwards kind of taking the blame for it. And he kind of said that he picked the wrong team, and that, he picked players that weren't ready. And you're kind of going, these are players that are playing every week in the Premier League. And that seemed like a bit of a cop-out to me, that, even England with 2 or 3 changes, because you look through the team, he wasn't playing under 18 internationals or under 21 internationals. These were guys who were playing week in, week out in the Premier League. Seasoned players. Even Conor Gallagher, probably the most inexperienced of the lot, had a very good full season at Crystal Palace. But, the likes of Kyle Walker, John Stones, Calvin Phillips, Harry Kane, there was enough experience in that team to beat the likes of Hungary, and enough talent. But I think that, he tried to move away from his ultra cautious, ultra defensive, 7 defenders, 3 attackers, let's make a goal and see if we can win it 1-0. That was kind of his MO in the Euros. He went away from that, and he played with Calvin Phillips, and I think it was Conor Gallagher and Jude Bellingham, and England looked very, very open. So I think last night is kind of confirmation to Gareth Southgate that he's not going to move away from that ultra conservative style. In fact, he's probably going to go right back to it and rely on his 3 attacking players, you go back to Rice and Phillips, flat back 5, and rely on the skilled players at the top end of the pitch to nick a goal.
It could be Ireland against England in League B, of course, in the Nations League next time. 4-0 was the result last night, by the way, so 2 draws, 2 defeats for England. They're bottom of League A, Group 3. Damien Delaney, great stuff. Thanks a million.
Thanks, lads.
Cheers, Damien Delaney there on the line, and really interesting stuff on the system. Johnny, great stuff. Thanks a million for being with us this morning.
Thanks, Owen. Thankfully, just so glad that last night wasn't like a horror show discussing it now, compared to last week. And now everything is good, and everything is rosy forever, evermore in Irish football.
OTB AM,
until we lose our next game.
Brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. More positivity coming your way tomorrow from 7:30 because Johnny will be here alongside Shane Hannon. We'll also have former Ireland football and rugby internationals David Connolly and Keith Wood, and much more besides as well. Right now, though, we're leaving you with some of Vinnie Perth's reaction to last night's game. Enjoy.
Well, Vinnie, there's only one place we can start tonight after that Ukraine 1, Ireland 1 draw in the Nations League, and that's the goal scored by Tailteann Collins, a centre-back dribbling from the edge of a centre circle and beating two men. A little bit of luck maybe with the ball off his knee, but then to show that composure to put the ball into the net. We don't usually see that kind of thing from Irish centre-backs, do we?
No, it was really brilliant goal, and it just shows you that the modern young centre-half coming through the system has got good ability with the ball at his feet, but it was so brave. It was the Irish team we spoke about during the game, but the centre-halves were so willing to step in to midfield and put Ukraine under pressure, and Tailteann Collins done that, won the ball back, and obviously dribbled past two players, and the little touch off his shin, as I would call it, was brilliant. But then, to be honest with you, to show the composure from 12-13 yards out, side footed with his right foot outside of the boot, and it was a perfect little neat finish as well. And normally the normal person who does that was lucky enough to get in that position, balloons them over the bar. So no, really brilliant play, and delighted. I think that goal will be well celebrated down in the Lawns and Cherry Orchard tonight. They normally in the clubhouse have the Irish games on for the kids after training, so for Nathan spent 70, he left at 16.5 that club, and a brilliant moment for as I said, the Collins family, who are steeped in Irish football history, and big moment for him and something for his career he can build on.
Just to stay with Collins before we go into the match any further, and we're not being reactionary because of tonight's goal and his performance all round, which was excellent again. But I said to you at half time during the game, it was the same with Burnley in the closing stage of the Premier League season. He was popping up in the box, right place at the right time, every time, blocking shots. It was the same for Ireland over the last 3 matches as well, 4 matches I should say. That doesn't happen by chance, that's not fluke, that's the sign of a really good defender who reads the game really well, and that's the main ingredient you have to have as a centre half. But then he's got so much more. He can score, he can dribble the ball, he can pass the ball, he can take it forward. Would it be fair to say that if he stays with Burnley this season, it might be a season wasted in the Championship, that he really should be looking at getting a move to a Premier League club? We know that he's been linked with Leeds and Newcastle.
Yeah, look, I think he's all the abilities. We know he plays right back as well at different stages for his club, so he's obviously a really good footballer, someone who's comfortable on the ball and a footballer. So he obviously has that. We've seen that with the goal, obviously. But look, we got to be careful a little bit as well. We wouldn't like him to go to a Newcastle and just be part of a 25-man squad. I think at this stage he could do with playing. The Championship's an extremely high level, and I think here in Ireland we judge how many players we got in the Premier League. And I think while that was very important to us back in the day, I think world football, the way it's developed, the Premier League is such the higher echelon of world football. It will be difficult to have lots of players there. So I'd be comfortable if Tailteann Collins was playing Championship football, but the real leader of Burnley, the centre half that they relied on, because it looks like they lose too big. Ben Mee and Tarkovsky look like they're off. So he's an opportunity to grow into that position and play regularly there and be the leader. And that may have more benefits than if he went to Newcastle as one of 4 centre halves, for argument's sake, or elsewhere. So look, by the way, it'd be great for him if he got a move as well to the Premiership. So I don't think there's any panic on that. I think we overanalyse that a little bit. Championship, good club. I think a good season under his belt and build on his form of this year would be more than enough for him. As I said, I think he's really developing well.
We should give credit as well to his centre-back partners tonight. Dara O'Shea making his competitive debut, and Dara O'Shea coming back for his first competitive start after that fractured ankle, which everybody thought it might take him a long time to come back from. Steve Bruce, I think, admitted for West Brom this season he probably brought him back a little bit too soon, but he finished off the season strongly. Dara Lenihan has been praised very highly by his manager Tony Mowbray at Blackburn. He had a great competitive debut as well. Yeah, look, I think personally, I felt that Dara O'Shea was ahead of them all in terms of his development, but fair play to Collins. He certainly put that cat amongst the pigeon, which is great. But Dara Lenihan
brilliant tonight. Looks like there's a lot of talk he's on his way to Middlesbrough as well. They're looking to get back into the Premiership and really have a go this year, so that's good. But look, I thought Dara was a little bit rusty at the start, but as he grew into the game, I thought really, really good. Look, if that was a young Italian side with 3 centre-halves, you'd say, geez, the Italians have just produced 3 more centre-halves. That's how good they were tonight. Albeit Ukraine weren't brilliant on the night and they didn't put them under, real sustained bouts of pressure. But Ireland defended brilliantly as a back three, and I have to say that was an outstanding performance from 3 young players. We know Dara's a little bit older because it's taken him a while, but and the key to what they've done is, it's fair to say Duffy and Egan weren't brilliant in the first 2 games in this window. Now they're under pressure because we've got real stars pushing them, and that's what we want, and that's ultimately how you make teams better. Young players coming through and putting the more senior players under pressure.
Yeah, and of course Obamidele, who we mentioned before the game as well, still to come back. But the other thing as well about the lads, their defending was obviously the key part of their game, but also their passing tonight. And you mentioned in the commentary as well, Dara O'Shea on the left-hand side, right-footed player, but some of the passes he was hitting, which were awkward for him because he was on the wrong side, were just incredible.
Yeah, and that when you play on the left side of any team as a right-footed player, it can help you to step back inside to the pitch. But he stepped inside on a couple of diags, and there was a great ball out to Alan Brown, and who laid it into Jeff Hendrick, and really good play from Ireland, and it came from that. But some of our forward passes were really good. People will say, were they long balls? And no, they were long forward passes we made up to Scott Hogan, up to Troy Parrott. And the distribution, I would say, of our back three and the goalkeeper improved tonight. Because even in Scotland game, I don't think we gave them a couple of chances, but just being a little bit careless. Our distribution was probably foot perfect. We mixed it up, went short when it was on into Josh Cullen, but also kept the Ukrainians guessing by going long at different stages. And look, for young players to read that in the middle of a game, I mean, that's priceless. And to be put under pressure, conceding a minute and a half into the second half, they weren't really flustered by those 3 young players, and I just felt it was as good as it gets from an Irish point of view from those centre halves.
I suppose briefly just to look at the midfield, and we had the wing backs in James McLean, Alan Brown. McLean worked his socks off, perhaps didn't see as much of the ball as Brown did on his side. He played really well tonight, Alan Brown, perhaps not getting the plaudits he deserves when he does put on a green or an orange shirt as it was tonight. Yeah. And again, the midfield 3, pretty good. I know you were saying about Josh Cullen, a little bit like Zinchenko for Ukraine, a lot of misplaced passes tonight, but maybe perhaps the exertions of the last couple of weeks really got to him tonight.
Yeah, just being overcritical, because of that position is such a kingmaker. If Josh Cullen can add a little couple of balls to his play, like very seldom you'd see Josh Cullen, switching the play with a 40-yard pass, or everything has to be shorter into people. And it's good and very good at it, but I think the combination of the 3 of them has worked really well in those 2 games. And we talk about systems a lot, and we bore people, but 2 8 to 6, all of that stuff. But the balance of sort of your 6 with your 8 being Malumbi to the right of it, and Knight to the left of it, sort of playing in the 10, and the work rate of them, and Knight joining in the front, means again that midfield 3 is so young. Josh Cullen is the oldest of them, around 25, but when you look at Knight and Malumbi, 20, 21, 22, my God, look, we've an opportunity. The future could be bright, and when you look at some, the age profile of that team tonight, I think that's been the shot in the arm that Stephen needed after a difficult 2 games. The young players have come in and really dragged this team up a level.
Troy Parrott will probably be kicking himself over that header that he had the opportunity to score before we got our first goal. But all around, you were very impressed with Troy Parrott's play. What was it that stood out about him, do you think, tonight?
Yeah, so obviously when you watch him live in those last 2 games, he mixes his game up quite well. He'll come in short and link up the play, and he's got a lovely touch, and at times he's a street footballer growing up in inner city Dublin. He knows how to dribble the ball over the cobblestones, no problem to him, and probably around a few bins and back as well. So he's got good ability with the ball at his feet, but also he knows to mix it up and run in behind. And we've seen that obviously with his goal against Scotland, but we also seen a couple of times tonight where And what that does is, even if you don't get the ball, it pins Ukraine centre-halves back another 5 yards because they're worried about Troy going in behind, which creates more space for the likes of Knight in there. So I think his game awareness, his intelligence has really improved. I think personally, I think the penny has dropped, and he's really sensing this is a real opportunity now for a kick on in his career. And again, look, what we got to do with the likes of Troy is, all the talk was Troy Parrott was the saviour of Irish football 2-3 years ago. Just got to be patient with these young lads, 22. But I just think there's a real hell of a good footballer there for us, and staying fit and continue to improve his game. You could see a mainstay in this Irish team for us, and you would see goals in Troy as well.
Yeah, he turns 21 in January next year, and he has said already on the record that he fancies maybe another loan next season. He said he might go on the pre-season tour with Tottenham down to Korea, which wouldn't be such a bad thing, but you know, that's a lad talking common sense really. He's not kind of thinking, right, let's go in and try and compete with Son and Kane and the other great attacking Kulusevski, the attacking talent that Tottenham have under Conte. He's just thinking, right, let's get another season in the lower leagues maybe under my belt, and then when he comes back, then we're looking at an older pairing of Son and Kane, and perhaps then that's Parrott's chance to really make a mark.
Yeah, so again, it's typical of where we are as a nation. We're like Tottenham Hotspur have two of the top maybe 10 strikers in the world in Kane and Son, and he's trying to break into that. So we have to be patient. We have to understand that we may not may not break into that Tottenham side, because he may not have the time to wait 4 or 5 years for them to dip, if it's going to take that long for them to. So look, it's not about the barometer isn't does Troy Parrott become a Spurs regular. It's, can he become a regular at a really high level, whether that's top end championship or a Premiership player. I think there's a Premiership player in waiting in him. It will take time, and then it's down to the lap of gods if he can have.
Well, look at Harry Kane. Harry Kane himself had to go out on loan
and sit on the bench when he went on loan, similar to Troy Parrott, and that's often what happens. And I see people quite often when players come on loan to them, and even League of Ireland clubs, a guy comes on loan and they say, "No, he'll never make it," etc. It's never easy to go on loan. The manager and the club take a loan player in to fill a hole for something else, so it's never ideal. But look, I think Troy definitely, you can see that maturity in his game and off the field as well, really coming to the fore. And I know a good few people who know him really well, and they tell me he's a great guy as well. So I think he will make the right decision in time, and hopefully somebody in the top end of the championship takes a chance on him, and then that helps his career kick on.
Yeah, and I suppose a lot of the players that played tonight at the start of this campaign, this series of 4 matches, some of the players might have been in the reckoning, or maybe in the front of our minds coming into this series of matches, but now they are. So you think that there are players that Stephen Kenny hasn't been able to use tonight or against Scotland. So he really has he is building depth there, as yourself and Joe mentioned on the radio earlier on this evening. And I suppose when you think about the mood of everybody after those first couple of games, understandably was very pessimistic, but Ireland come out of these 4 matches now feeling a little bit more hopeful, maybe going to the matches in September.
Yeah, look, we've a great debate in Irish football at the moment, and it's either I don't know how many people are in the middle, but it's either pro Stephen Kenny or
it's like everything nowadays, Vinnie. Everything is so polarised, you can't be in the middle.
What I've learned this week is patience is the key with this group, okay? And, I was on with JD after the Armenia game, and I was very critical of that performance, very critical of the shape of the team. I thought we looked tired, and I felt we lacked real intensity and pace, and I felt against teams like that we need to change the shape. But actually, by hook or by crook, we've brought in these young players who've given a real enthusiastic element to this team, tigerish performances, combative in midfield, and that's always what we were built on. Yes, we had the brilliance of Duff, Keane, really O'Shea at centre half, or whatever the case may be, but we always were competitive and we always left everything on the line. So we can't get away from that bad performances against Armenia. They have to disappear from this group as much as possible, but we got to be patient, and that's where I learned the lesson to say, and people will say, oh well, he's speaking up for his own mate Stephen Kenny. Yes, I am, because what's coming through, the age profile of this team. Omar Bamadele, 19. You know, Nathan Collins, 21. Dara O'Shea, 23. I mean,
Parrott's 20.
Parrott's 20.
Yeah.
Obafemi's 21.
Yeah. Jason Malumbi is another man, 21.
Jason
22.
Knight, 21.
Yeah.
So we've got Will Smallbone, hasn't been near the squad, but if he can kick on, I've watched the 21s and he's been really the standout player, but there's other players in there really bubbling underneath. So we've got to be patient. We've got to give this manager time. We've got to be critical if we feel they get it wrong, which I was last week. And I didn't enjoy doing that, and it still hurts me a little bit that I was probably a little bit harsh. But I've learned the big lessons. Patience is the key with this group. You look at Troy Parrott, perfect example. He'll have dips and in his forms, he'll have highs and lows, and that's what happens with young players. There is the odd exceptions where they become world class, but by and large, most players find their way to the top. And look, you could argue the average age of our starting 11, we could get it as low as 21 if we wanted, and we'd have a lot of players with caps. But if we can get to a European Championships in the next campaign, well, then we could do what Wales done, and because of the strength and depth there, albeit they'd have failed to get big moments for them, but we could qualify for a couple of tournaments on a run, because you see a lot of teams at these championships, and the average age is probably closer to 28 and 22, and their average age is closer to 22 at the moment. So it's been a brilliant 2 games for the manager and the staff, and they've answered a lot of critics. I could see Stephen Kenny was hurt. I could see it in him. I think he was hurt by the criticism of the first 2 games, and the staff and the players have really responded well. Tactically tonight, we were exceptional, and you must give the coaching staff all the credit for that. When we didn't have the ball, we were tactically sound. The odd little moments you're going to get that with young players, we were really good tonight. So look, we've got to learn from that and build, continue to build. Yes, have the debate, and half are right and half are wrong, but look, I feel like we're halfway to something or halfway to nothing, and I'd rather be positive and say we're on the right track under this manager.
May not be a Bale in the team. We certainly got a Bale-esque finish from Collins tonight. That's great, Vinnie. Thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.